Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 147 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor, show by show, from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame, joined as always by the creator, the co-host, the master of the 48-hour dough ball ferment, Matt Feuerstein.
Oh my God. Well, I'm not going to elaborate on that one, but I'll let people just wonder what that could possibly mean. At least I'm the master of something. And it's not my domain. I'll tell you that much. Seinfeld
It's
fans.
dough balls.
Seinfeld fans for that one. Yeah, it's the summertime. And it's not as hot today, I think, as it was the last time we recorded. So I feel like this is going to be smooth sailing. No, I'm really excited for this one. This is again another one of those milestone episodes in our very own milestone series.
And what we're going to get right to the show because there's a lot to cover on this one. But right before we do that, I would be remiss if I did not mention that Matt and I, we do have an open relationship. We do see other podcasts, and both of us have been on other podcasts since the last episode. Matt, you are on our good friend and former guest of the show, Alan Cudahan's Alan's Pro Wrest Paradise at the PW Torch. It is behind a paywall, but there is plenty of good audio there, worthy of a subscription. And Matt, you were on episode recently of Alan's What's on the Telly series, where it's kind of like a Secret Santa, where you each give the other guy a show, an old wrestling show that occurred that month to watch. I've only been through your first half of the show that was about your show, but I will just say, growing up with you and a bunch of other people as teenagers during the Attitude Era and chatting in AOL Instant Messenger chats, it was like a weird thrill to like hear you talk about the wrestling we grew up on again. Like, it is so weird to hear you for some reason in audio form talking about like the Attitude Era WWF.
I'm not sure if I've ever done it before. Like, other than in like quick, like old Joe vs. the World episodes where we very quickly run through every WrestleMania or something. I think this is the first time I ever did like a long form show review of anything from that era. It is very weird because it's like, I feel like most people our age who like wrestling at all have an intense nostalgia for that era. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say like the kind of fans that we are like really don't. Like, we liked wrestling before that and we liked wrestling after that, and that era wasn't so special to us other than like it was weird that other people in school also liked wrestling at the same time. Like, it wasn't just us. But like, yeah, it's not that good. And I think that it's always been a pet peeve of mine the way certain people put that era on a pedestal, because it doesn't really deserve it, other than, I guess, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, they were really special. And, Vince McMahon was a good heel and blah, 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 whatever. Shut up. But I don't know. It just doesn't suit my taste at all anymore. Not that I didn't find it exciting at the time, but I know, like, if you listen to that podcast, which, as you mentioned, you got to pay the big bucks for, because you know what, Trevor, I'm worth it. I tell that myself in the mirror every morning. I say, you're worthy of a paywall, Matthew. You're worthy of a paywall. Anyway, point being, it was fun to talk shit about the Attitude Era. That's what I'm really trying to say.
So, yeah, if you want to listen to Matt get religious talking about the greater power, not the higher power. See, if you call him the higher power, you haven't listened to this episode. And if you want to hear Alan Cudahan talk about hose, there's a podcast waiting for you. And meanwhile, if you want to hear me talk about how AEW's gotten good again, I was invited to talk about just that subject on the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, hosted by Jesse Collins. It is for free to listen to on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, because I am a man of the people. I insisted on it, Matt. I said, I'm not going to be like highfalutin Matt now. Well, no, it's always free. I had no choice, but still,
I listened to that episode today on the subway, because I was like, you know what, 5 hours of Trevor tonight is not going to be enough. I need to hear another 2 hours of Trevor.
Well, we're going to try and keep it to 4 or less. I have done, in fact, that brings us to, of course, why do we keep alluding to why this show is going to be so long? It's because we are covering tonight the first ever in its history Ring of Honor pay-per-view, Respect is Earned. And as a result of ROH jumping to pay-per-view, this show had, I would say, the most newsletter and internet wrestling website coverage that Ring of Honor has ever gotten since the Feinstein scandal. And because of that, in an interest to keep this show hopefully 3 to 4 hours, I have done some judicious editing to a, believe it or not, I do edit things, and I've done it this time to a higher degree than normal. I have cut things in half. I've taken out sentences here and there. I've combined articles together. And I say all this just to let you know, I think I have let context remain intact. But if I say something in the voice of one of these people and you go, I have a bone to pick with that, maybe go back and read the original source just to be safe. Like, do not take my word for it just because I've tried, because I have done a little more surgery on some of these quotes than before to this episode in the interest of something that is within 8 miles of brevity. It will not be. But we'll go to first, we have a couple Long Boy Dave quotes from The Observer, and then we got some shorter quotes, and then we have a little interviewee, and I can't believe I said interviewee. What's wrong with me? Matt, if you, as always, if you want, I'll have points to stop where we can talk about different things, but if you, at any point, you want to talk about something, just chime in immediately. So we will go first to The Observer. Dave talked about when this story broke. Dave wrote at the time, ROH announced a deal with Ken Gelman's G-Funk Sports and Entertainment for pay-per-view events that will be priced at $9.95 or $14.95, depending on where they air. They will air 2-hour tape shows that will run throughout the month. 6 shows are contracted for over a 1-year deal, airing every other month. The first show, called Respect is Earned, will be taped on May 12th at the Manhattan Center for showings throughout the month of July, beginning July 1st. Booker Gabe Sapolsky is attempting to not announce a card at all. That may change if he feels the need to announce a main event to sell tickets to completely sell out the 1,250-seat arena, although with just days to go and the building almost sold out, announcing matches isn't going to make much difference. The current plan is to book a show similar to Raw in that angles on the show will lead to the main matches, although obviously with more of an emphasis on the matches and with longer matches. It will be presented as if it's a live show without any noticeable editing of matches or segments. At first, the idea was to present a Match of the Year show, airing bouts that placed in last year's balding, like Danielson versus McGuinness, Danielson versus Kenta, and the Dragon Gate Trios match. But after a similar attempt by TNA to expose its product by showing best of matches on a February Spike TV special turned out to be a failure, the decision was to air a major house show. The feeling was it didn't work with TNA as viewers want to watch a show as opposed to matches they know are taped if they are high quality matches. WWE year-end review highlight shows at the end of the year also lose audience drastically as the show goes on. When it comes to something like this, you only get one chance to make a first impression. The plan right now is not to do a major pay-per-view taping every other month. How the second show in September will be filled has not been decided. The working idea is to tape matches and angles at different house shows that would be a pay-per-view exclusive. According to Sapolsky, the business model for ROH is not changing. They are going to do house shows with the bulk of the revenue coming through DVD sales. They are not banking on the idea taped pay-per-view events are going to bring in significant revenue in as compared with DVD sales of an event. They will sacrifice DVD sales of the May 12th show. It will be released, but Sapolsky expects fewer sales than usual since the pay-per-view will air before the DVD is released, because they have to establish pay-per-view. But at this point, the decision is not to give away a house show that they can make more money on selling DVDs. The profit margin for a DVD sale is significantly higher than for a pay-per-view broadcast due to the lower price. Obviously, if they were to do 10,000 buys, that model would change, but it's not what they are planning. When TNA ran weekly Wednesday night pay-per-view shows from Nashville with no television promotion for a $9.95 price, they ranged from 5,000 to 12,000 buys most weeks, with most weeks coming in around 8,000. These were also live shows as opposed to tape. ROH does have an enthusiastic base of fans, some of whom may not go through the trouble of ordering DVDs or maybe would only order a few tapes per year. Attempts early in their existence to use local television to try and sell upcoming shows as well as DVDs turned out not to be cost effective and were dropped. Their television exposure in the UK has helped spur DVD sales, but similar exposure in Canada hasn't seemed to make any difference. Still, nobody seems to be expecting big pay-per-view numbers for a show that will have no national television pushing it and will be taped from nearly 2 months earlier. One of the reasons ROH made this decision is that the DVD business has hit a plateau. The feeling is that with advertising on Barker channels, the channel that plugs all the currently available pay-per-view offerings, and the ROH name mentioned in cable guides, it would up the profile of the company, as would being a pay-per-view company. In theory, this would lead to exposing the product to more and newer fans, more awareness from people who don't know they exist, and ultimately new DVD customers. The company's profitable some months and loses money in other months, and we're looking for ways to increase the fan base to make things consistently profitable. The show will be carried in the U.S. on in-demand TVN and EchoStar Communications, aka the Dish Network. They are still in negotiations for clearance on DirecTV. According to Sapolsky, there is no other major changes ROH is planning as far as how it presents the product or how it will market the product other than the DirecTV negotiations. Sapolsky, who was at first strongly against it when owner Kerry Silkin and Sid Eck opened discussion about 6 months ago about doing pay-per-view because he saw firsthand how trying to get bigger killed ECW, changed his mind in recent months. The risks of doing taped pay-per-view shows are not significant.
All right, well, so this feels like a place for me to chime in. We kind of know from history that Sapolsky never really got on board with this idea, right? Which is because it, messed up his whole booking patterns and stuff. It's interesting to hear him be the spokesperson of this whole thing, knowing that deep down he was not really a fan of it, right? Like it makes all of the PR seem a little odd.
I think we'll get to some more of the price stuff later, but I think that's like, this is kind of reminiscent of the Feinstein scandal, right? Where it's like Gabe is the mouthpiece. He's never been a great mouthpiece at PR, and
he's good at PR when he believes in what he's saying, but when when he doesn't, he's not great at it.
But I guess the first thing to talk about here is how weird an idea this is when you think about historically, since the advent of television, wrestling has always worked one way, which was you get on TV, the free TV show builds a fan base because it gives them free samples, and then you monetize that fan base by selling them tickets to live shows, by selling them pay-per-views. Now, the economy's changed a bit because now TV money is so huge that that's like the whole ball game. But for most of wrestling's modern history, it was you either got television for no money. You did, like I said, a barter deal where they got the commercial revenue and you got the TV time. Maybe even you paid. Occasionally there was some times where channels would pay significant money for wrestling. I believe like the Christian Broadcasting Channel paid World Class in the early 80s a decent chunk of change. But ROH here is trying to expand their audience by, like, the argument they're making is we know the pay-per-views probably won't sell much and we won't make as much money on them as we do selling DVDs, but because they're going to be on the cable guide and on the Barker channel, as Dave calls it. Matt, did you ever call it the Barker channel?
No, I'm not even totally sure what that's referring to.
Okay, I don't know if they even have this. I was wondering if we were going to have to explain this. So, at least in my cable system, I imagine a lot of cable systems, there was what I would call the preview channel, which was basically a channel devoted to nothing but airing promotional videos for what was coming up in the next month or so on pay-per-view on your cable broadcast. And it just ran them on a loop.
That's right. I don't know if that was still even around in 2007, but yeah, I remember that somewhat in the 90s, going onto that channel to see what was airing on pay-per-view. That seems to be something I remember. Yeah, okay, so I think I remember where I've heard the term Barker channel. Wait, when they would have like the countdown shows, right? For like, countdown to WrestleMania that would air 30 minutes before WrestleMania. Before like they had like the free-for-alls that had live matches and stuff, it would just be like Gene Okerlund or whatever in a studio hyping up the matches like he would.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was the countdown show, but then years later I saw on the internet, it's like, oh, these would air on the Barker channel. And I was like, I don't think they aired anywhere on my cable system except like the 30 minutes before the pay-per-view if you already ordered it. But I guess in some places they aired. So yes, that is where I've heard of the Barker channel. Was it named after Bob Barker? Um,
The, because
pay per view buyers, come on down. No, he wasn't
the
the one who
price
said
is
that.
always right.
Yeah, he wasn't the one who said
Um,
that. But anyway.
but yeah, like to show you how desperate I was. I shouldn't be doing a throwback story on a show this long, but I will just say to show how desperate I was as a young child in the '90s for pro wrestling, because otherwise all you could get is watching it live or renting a tape from your video store. Um, I would go on the preview channel and it would usually show like 40 minutes to an hour worth of previews for like pay-per-view concerts, pay-per-view boxing fights,
Movies, even.
pay-per-view movies. Yeah, exactly. And I would be so desperate just to be able to watch like modern wrestling on demand that like 5-minute promo for a pay-per-view or whatever, I would like watched the entire loop until I got to the pay-per-view. And sometimes I would flip away because I was like, I don't want to watch this boring ad for like the New Kids on the Block pay-per-view. And then I would like get engrossed in the other show and miss the pay-per-view promo. And I would know where the pay-per-view promo was in the order. So I'd be like, I have to sit here for another 40 minutes to watch this preview for Royal Rumble 1995. Like,
What's fun? On YouTube, you could go on and be like, they could show like pay-per-view preview channel highlights from like some random month in 1990. And, sometimes like a wrestling promo will come up. I think that this is even worse than what you're saying. As an adult, I've gone and watched this on YouTube. Pay-per-view previews from almost 40 years ago. That's what I've done.
Matt, I was downloading a torrent last night of 30-minute pay-per-view pre-shows. I was like, I
Oh,
gotta have these. So we are equal. We are the same flavor of sad when it comes to this.
fair,
Um,
fair.
I guess before I move on to the other news, all the other coverage, one other thing I want to mention is a big thing that came out at the time about all this, reading back all the coverage, a lot of people didn't like at the time was, why can't the pay-per-view be live? Why is it going to be taped? All this stuff. And I think you'll see a lot of what ROH did here was to like dip their toe in the water to make this as low a lift as possible. Because really, ROH did not change what they were doing. All they did was they taped their show the same way they normally did, post-produced it the same way they normally did with the post-production commentary. So it was not live commentary. They did all the camera editing afterwards, all that. And instead of putting the tape out on DVD first, they just sent a 2-hour cut of it to the pay-per-view carriers. But going to your point about how it annoyed Gabe, this increased the time between, because they still would put them out on DVD, but the problem would be, you just heard, this pay-per-view, for example, was taped in the middle of May. The pay-per-view companies were going to air it at the start of July, although different companies will get to air it at different dates in July. And then they had a 1-month exclusivity window from the first day they aired it before ROH could even start selling the DVD. So you have these events where, they run and the company can't sell the DVD for 3 months. And even put on sale. And so, yeah, that started to create this kind of weird out of order thing that
Well, yeah. Well, also keep in mind they also had to then release the shows that came after it, which
yeah.
that messed up some of the logical continuity of the storylines.
And so, yeah, so obviously but for people that are wondering, well, why don't they just do it live? Wouldn't that be more exciting when they get more buys? And I don't think some people, nowadays it's different because you see even indies with the power of the internet and that infrastructure being able to do like ITV pay-per-views for relatively cheaply. And back in this day, the internet was still not good enough that you could really do internet pay-per-views. And
But the funny part is like it was only like maybe like 2 years away from it becoming pretty common for indies to do live streams, right? Like it wasn't that far away.
Although it was rough at first. Like there's a reason why, like to this day, you still see a few fans on Twitter use like Gabe asking how the stream is as a meme because that's how it used to be, like
On WNN, yeah.
Yeah. But I think people don't realize,
WWN, right? It's a WNN.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think people don't realize how much pay-per-views cost to stream live when you're renting satellite time and all that stuff, and you have to have the production truck. Like when I was reading the coverage of this, Wade Keller noted like that. He mentioned that in the days of when ECW got in pay-per-view starting in like '97, he estimates the cost of them producing a live pay-per-view back in that day was give or take $200,000. So ROH did not have $200,000 per pay-per-view to do this. So they did it a much different way. We'll go to our next longer observer thing. Then we'll get into some short things or shorter things. And this is Dave talking about that price. In fact, Dave wrote, The idea is the $9.95 price tag will get people to sample, and they can expand their audience base and draw more at the house shows and sell more DVDs. It's both low risk with tape shows and low reward. If they get 5,000 buys for the month, that'll probably mean some money in their pockets. Is that possible? Again, uncharted waters. At 10,000 buys, they may see $30,000 out of this, and for a group at the level of ROH to add $180,000 to revenues over the course of a year is a substantial success. Perhaps word of mouth will make it a success. It's an idea worth trying. The brand ROH is the best known it's ever been, and 2006 was its best year to date. Right now, their audience is limited right now far more by lack of exposure than by limitations of the product's appeal. The problem is in timing. This is the absolute worst time to get into pay-per-view. They are getting in at the end of the most insane month in history. I forget what was going on then, other than I don't know if Dave wrote this after the Benoit thing, but maybe there was a lot of like boxing.
No, I wasn't it. So it wasn't about like WrestleMania that year with all of like that was such a huge show, and then was there like a, I don't know, like one of those like De La Hoya fights maybe, like
yeah, it might have been like that first De La Hoya fight that caused Dave and Brian to say real sports build, this is the future of wrestling every 2 minutes. But so yeah, Dave continues.
Yes, by the way, yes, Oscar De La Hoya versus Floyd Mayweather, May 5th, 2007.
Yeah, that was a huge fight because that was when they did like the 24/7 series previewing it, and that hadn't become like the norm for MMA and boxing yet. And again, if you listen to Wrestling Observer Radio at the time, Dave would not stop talking about that. And so Dave
and then WrestleMania 23 was on April 1st, and that was the Trump WrestleMania, and that was, I'm pretty sure, the most purchased WrestleMania ever.
So yeah, this was a time where a lot of, I guess to Dave's point, a lot of money was getting sucked out of the pay-per-view market by all the fans' pockets by these giant shows. But Dave continues, they're looking at the $9.95 price tag as a positive because it is cheaper than any other product on the market. But the case history of TNA doesn't bear that out. TNA's buys tripled immediately when switching from 4 $9.95 shows per month to one $29.95 show, even though the former on paper was the far better value for the money. Pro wrestling attendance went through the roof in the late 90s during a period where the average ticket price for a show went from $12 to $30. The leading promoters would tell me, and I got the breakdowns daily, and even though this doesn't make sense, it proved to be an absolute fact that there was a mentality where it's far easier to sell expensive seats than cheap seats. People going to a live event are far quicker to buy a $40 ticket than a $10 ticket, even for the exact same seat, because a $10 ticket mentally equals low rent product. It's like going on a date to a cheap restaurant or an expensive restaurant. Even if the food at the cheap restaurant actually tastes better, you still aren't going out on a first date to your favorite cheap restaurant. The argument is that pay-per-view is not meant as their main revenue stream. DVD sales are. They would rather go low and get people to sample, and if they make new fans, they'll have new DVD customers. Until the recent WWE decline with the last price raise, every company, whether it be WWF, WCW, or UFC, that has raised the price of its pay-per-views has followed with buys increasing. The fact it wasn't the case for the most recent WWE price increase probably speaks more for an oversaturation of the market, lesser interest in the shows, and greater competition than the price increase being a turnoff. But there are limitations. Oh, go on.
I wonder if that trend continued like a year or two later when the global economy crashed. Like I mean, it might have. I'm curious. It's just interesting to listen to something that is happening in like, the middle of 2007 when you know what is coming in just like a year later. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely, like, if ROH was hitting rocky waters, certainly what was to come in the next year or two was not going to help. But Dave continues, but there are limitations. When UFC jacked up the prices last year for the live Hoist Gracie versus Matt Hughes show in Los Angeles at Staples Center, yes, $700 for a decent seat was a turnoff. But in the ROH case, my feeling is you would get the same audience for $9.95 that you would get for $24.95, while more than doubling the revenue using the latter price. The theory that cheaper will lead to impulse buys or encourage introductory buys was the same theory Jeff and Jerry Jarrett went with in 2002, and one that through trial and error, there was no question they would no longer find that way of thinking valid. Down the line, I'd increase the price to $19.95 because I don't see anyone interested in turning it down over $19.95, and that way they make twice as much for the same number of buys. The idea is to keep the price low to get people who are just flipping channels on a Thursday night to see it, see the price is low, and sample. And the hope is if they convert those people to being regular fans, they'll make a lot more from them long term than if they didn't order because it was 1995. So, Matt, yeah, this was an interesting thing too, which was the economy of this, because at this time ROH was selling their DVDs for $20, 15, I guess it averaged out to if you wait for a sale and like the buy three get one free, stuff like that. But what I think people forget too is, so not only were these pay-per-views, depending on the provider, $5 cheaper because they're selling for $9.95 to $14.95, but also the cut is different because ROH producing the DVDs in-house, I can't imagine it costs that much to physically manufacture their DVDs. They weren't putting a lot of money into the packaging or any of that. And pay-per-views, the pay-per-view company takes at least half the money. Like, I believe I did some research on this. Like, depending on how successful you are, sometimes you can negotiate a better cut. Like, I think UFC in its last contract before they went to ESPN, they negotiated where they got 70% of every pay-per-view buy and the cable companies got 30. But typically it's more 50-50. I think I saw Brandon Thurston say that as of like a year ago, AEW got 45% of their pay-per-views and the cable companies get 55. Dave, with that one number he said in that quote, made it sound like he was almost estimating that ROH might get 30%. So it's not just that they're selling it for cheaper, they're selling it, they're going to get a way lower cut than they would get off just selling a DVD they made themselves. And yeah, again, their whole idea here is not to make money off the pay-per-views. I'm sure they would like that. But their whole idea here was, if anything, they're going to cannibalize their DVDs with this. But the idea is that they're going to create new fans. And I will just give you guys a sneak peek at the future. It doesn't increase their audience. Like, I don't have quotes, but I know from the Observer in like 2008 and just living through the time, the Ring of Honor comes out and tells people like the pay-per-views basically sell on the high end of our expectations, but our expectations were kind of low, like reasonable, so they weren't particularly huge buys, and our DVD sales did not go up, and our live ticket attendance did not go up. So in that sense, they did not succeed, you know. But
there's nothing that I'm less confident in, and when it comes to this subject, and that's saying a lot because I'm not confident in much, than in my ability to analyze business or metrics or numbers. But I can say that it seemed like a silly idea at the time, and it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like it was a successful idea. So I was just like, all right, well, I think my mindset at this point was like, I don't think this is going to affect the popularity of Ring of Honor, but I do hope that it leads to them putting out some really kick-ass shows in the hopes of making this worthwhile. I think that's mainly what my mindset was as a fan.
yeah, and I remember being pissed off because I was just, I don't like change, man. And I was just like, oh, we're not going to hear all the theme songs? Like, oh, the show's going to be out of order?
That's true,
like,
that's true.
And I also don't think the first pay-per-views were available in my area, so it was like even more of a wait now, which was irritating.
You know how to get a handle on things that aren't available in your area, Trevor. Don't pretend that you had some trouble finding these things.
But I do kind of agree with Dave's point that I feel like with pay-per-views, getting people to try something, the gulf between getting someone that's never spent $1 on your product to getting them to spend any money at all is bigger than the gulf between getting like people that already spend money on your product to spend a little more. Like, I feel like probably every ROH fan that bought this show for $10 would have paid 20 for it. And I don't know how many more people are like, well, I've never bought Ring of Honor before, but I'm going to buy it now because it was $10 when you could buy the DVDs for 15 or 20 anytime in the last few years. I guess the only arguments are it is more convenient and immediate to buy it on pay-per-view. There can be an impulse purchase of I'm bored. Oh, it's on demand or on pay-per-view. I'll buy it and I'll watch it right now. As opposed to DVDs where it's like ROH was never an impulse purchase when it's like, oh, I'll buy this and it'll be in my mailbox in 3 weeks later. It was never a thing of I'm bored on a Friday or Saturday night. What am I going to do? Oh, I'll order a pay-per-view. I still feel like they probably could have jacked it because I would be curious how many new fans made this their first exposure to ROH.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll get into like what makes a pay-per-view appealing, in a little while, but like, yeah, the way they did it, I don't think was gonna get anybody's juices flowing. Like, it would have to be somebody who was just like had been curious for a while and like, okay, I can push a button. Like, I guess that was the idea. But I feel like
Yeah.
even that would only work once. You know,
Yeah.
one special pay-per-view event, not a series of them.
And if you want a remarkably optimistic look at how this paper would do, we'll go to a PW Torch poll that happened at the time. In a PWTorch.com online poll this week, happened before the pay-per-view, with over 1,100 votes cast, 50% of response say they will order pay-per-views. About one-third of them will be first-time ROH viewers. Nearly 1 in 5 said they will still have no interest in ROH, even with the move to pay-per-view. Nearly 10% said the review of the pre-taped event will influence their decision. Only 5% said they'll stick to DVDs, while 16% said they didn't order pay-per-views. Overall, encouraging numbers for ROH. Yeah, I'm going to say 50% of PW Torch readers did not buy this pay-per-view. I'm going to go out. I believe also they said that, well, I'll get to that in a second, actually. Another thing from the Torch they wrote at the time, the pay-per-view will also include a collection of some of the best promos and videos from ROH's past. That did not happen. There is a lot of interesting stuff in this coverage of RH was clearly coming up with like a lot of ideas like, oh, we'll tape one match on every show for pay-per-view. They don't really do that. Some pay-per-views they'll have one match that'll be taped at a different show, but almost all their pay-per-views will be almost entirely taped in one venue at one time. You know, they talk about, oh, we might do a greatest hit show. They don't do that, probably for the reasons Dave talked about in The Observer.
That would have been a bad idea. I'm definitely in favor of not doing the greatest hit show for money. That seems silly to me.
Yeah, although I guess part of me wonders, is there any reason they couldn't have done what they did and also a greatest hit show, but maybe they didn't want to saturate the market?
Yeah, I mean, what if they had done that like? I mean, listen, if they were just going for exposure, they could have done that TNA like 1 penny thing if they wanted to throw in that greatest hit show. But
yeah,
I don't know.
And they don't do this collection of the best promos and videos from ROH's past. They don't do any kind of looking back stuff. So next we'll go to the Torch, where they mentioned about how this is kind of a leap into the future. Basically, they changed how they thought they were going to try things based on the success of this pay-per-view, because PW Torch wrote, ROH management decided to run another pay-per-view taping because they felt things went so well in Manhattan on May 11th, so it made sense to management to do more pay-per-view tapings in the future. Dave wrote in The Observer, ROH have announced the pay-per-view that will air for the month of September, which will be the pay-per-view after this one, will be taped on June 23rd in Chicago. I know there are production issues involved, but if they were going to do a 6/23 pay-per-view taping for the idea of being up to date and all, that would have been the better show to air on July 1st. Obviously, they wanted the New York crowd, usually their hottest crowd, and the Manhattan Center, which looks more like a professional arena than most places they go, because you never get a second chance to make a first impression. The actual reason is they have no major shows in July except in Japan, and feel that will be a big DVD seller, so they don't want it on pay-per-view. The plan of taping a match here and a match there as the pay-per-view instead of doing a card was changed after New York went so well. So yeah, again, their initial idea, I think this is really interesting, where ROH's initial idea was, we want the pay-per-views to be good, but not too good, because if they're too good, fans won't buy the DVDs, and the DVDs are where we make our real money. And if you look at this first card, I think as we get into it, this first pay-per-view was very, very much felt like, let's give them a good show, but not our A-tier card. And that philosophy, I don't know if they see the pay-per-view numbers for the first pay-per-view or what, it immediately changes, because starting with the second pay-per-view, going through the third and the fourth, I would argue they give away a bunch of their potential best DVD selling matches that they have on the books for the rest of 2007. Like, next pay-per-view after this one, they give away Nigel versus Danielson. Pay-per-view after that, they give away Briscoes versus Steen and Generico in a ladder match, and Danielson versus Morishima. Pay-per-view after that, they give away Nigel beating Morishima for the world title. So, like, they clearly have one philosophy for this show that for some reason they completely change after this pay-per-view.
Yeah, I mean, again, like when we actually review the show, we'll talk about the philosophy behind this pay-per-view. But my idea for a pay-per-view, when they first did it, like one of the reasons I was disappointed at the time in what they did for this show, again, that's not my review of the show, but why I was disappointed at the time was like, I always thought of like your first pay-per-view as like in the sense of like ECW Barely Legal. Like you're going to build to something that people have been waiting for a long time. I feel like when you want to pay for something like that, you're paying for like a special event, not just like a series of matches people have already seen before, but like a special event that seems big. And it's much harder to do that while it's taped. But I was still surprised they didn't try. I think that was my reaction in 2007 as a 22-year-old.
Yeah, and I remember also looking at this current paper and being like, this was the first pay-per-view. Again, that's not my review of the show, but
Yeah,
and
well, I guess I also jump ahead and stuff. Don't when you talk about this card on paper, they did something crazy for this show, which I don't know if you remember this, Trevor, or if this came up
they
in your
did not
research.
advance a card.
They did not announce
Right.
anything in advance. Every match that showed came out was a surprise. Like they never did that for any regular show. They just like it was so strange. And so I went to the show being like they must have something insanely huge planned if they're gonna just go with like no announcements whatsoever. And obviously they didn't have anything insanely huge planned. But it was a very strange strategy. And I'm still not totally sure what the idea behind it was.
It was basically PWG Mystery Vortex, maybe
Yes,
before
yes.
PWG did Mystery Vortex. And as Dave Redden said in that first thing we went over, ROH was so hot in New York, they sold out without a card announced.
Right. Well,
And
although I think the idea of a first pay-per-view is a
yeah,
draw in and of itself, especially for a venue of that size.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, I did know it was not announced, but I mean, like when I was reading the results of what happened, I was like you, where I was like, oh, if it's a pay-per-view and they're not even announcing it, it's going to be huge. And then I kept reading the matches. I was like, when I got to the end, I was like, okay, that sounds like a good show, but like, there's nothing special here. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of shows more important than this one on paper. But again, ROH probably changed their philosophy because they also start doing this thing where we'll get to where if you look at the bone. So what ROH does with this pay-per-view is they release it as a two DVD set when they're finally allowed to release it. One DVD is just the pay-per-view. The other DVD is all the other matches and segments they taped that didn't go on the DVD. I mean, go on the pay-per-view, which is for one crazy because they told to around 3 hours, so they could fit it all on one DVD. And two, we'll get into this. There was nothing if you bought the pay-per-view, there was nothing on that bonus disc, that extra hour of the show that would make you want to double dip and also buy the DVD. And that's another thing that where their philosophy changes, where starting with the next show, and they don't do this for every pay-per-view, they start putting one extra match on the DVD. That's almost like whenever you see a band release a greatest hits album and they record like one or two new songs that hopefully entice like the hardcore fan that already owns all those albums to buy this. It's like they try and put one great match on this unaired pay-per-view. So like next pay-per-view, if you buy the DVD, that would be the only way you could get like the next Danielson versus Kenta match.
Yeah,
I think a pay-per-view.
I think that's the only example of what you're talking about, Trevor. Like as far as
I think
something of that caliber.
yeah, of that caliber, I do think one or two pay-per-views down the line they do Jay Briscoe versus Necro Butcher in like a no DQ match or something. Which I think
That's
is
cool. It's not quite Danielson and Kent.
yeah, it's not Danielson Kenta, but not much is. So anyway, PW Insider, Ring of, and I think one of the DVDs also gave you like the Matt Sydal farewell match. They didn't put that on pay-per-view. So again, maybe not. They led the strongest thing, but I'll say this: they all have something more interesting than the bonus hour of this pay-per-view. So
Yes, it's where the big draw is like a fake dating show skit.
next we have a PW Insider. They wrote Ring of Honor's July 1st pay-per-view debut was picked up by broadcast trade publication Multi-Channel News tonight. One thing that has been overlooked thus far is that beyond the scheduled airing date, the 2-hour pay-per-view will be available via a video-on-demand platform, giving prospective buyers a greater, more convenient opportunity to watch at their leisure, in theory. RH President Kerry Silkin was the driving factor behind bringing the company a pay-per-view, feeling that the company's pretty much reached the saturation of their fan base with their current setup, and this was a way to expand their overall awareness with the average wrestling fan who might not be a die-hard internet fan. The negotiation process has been ongoing for months, and wrestlers were quietly signed over the last 4 to 6 weeks. The pay-per-view press release noted that events will take place not just in the United States, but abroad, leaving a future option for taped pay-per-views from other countries or to run taped best-of-style pay-per-views from numerous locations down the line. Again, yet another thing ROH was floating at this time they did not do. They did not tape a pay-per-view abroad. They did not do one in Japan or the UK or anything like that. Figure 4 Weekly wrote, Brian Alvarez wrote, Gabe Sapolsky noted that ROH has months where they break even and months where they make a little bit of money, but nobody is getting rich. RH owner Kerry Silkin, while he doesn't believe he'll make millions off Ring of Honor, would like to make more money than they're making now, and he hit upon this idea. When Zapolsky was first approached, he was vehemently against it, having noted the deaths of many pay-per-view only companies over the last decade. Silkin explained that the economy of a cheaper to produce tape show, and also explained that this wasn't even about how much money the shows made on pay-per-view. If they sold 0 buys, it could potentially be worth it, because the whole idea is to increase the exposure of the ROH name. I will just say that is insane. That is fucking insane.
Yes.
Again, I just can't get over, like, you know what? It was worth a try. It is crazy that they're like just being on paper. Like I will say this, it did get them more exposure, but it got them more exposure mostly in all the stuff I'm reading right now, which is the Torch, the Observer, PW Insider, which were places that were already talking about Ring of Honor and praising them on a regular basis. Like, I don't think they were getting a lot of new coverage. They were getting a brief, big bump in coverage from the people that always covered them.
Yeah, I mean, if you followed wrestling history, especially like in the peak pay-per-view era throughout like the 90s, there were so many random ass wrestling companies that had pay-per-view shows. You know what I mean? Like that didn't make them suddenly viable because they had pay-per-views. I mean, I know Gabe was basically trying to make that argument to Kerry based on what you just said, but like, they're random, like, I mean, the UWF and a few random women's pay-per-views and Heroes of Wrestling. I mean, that one, at least, had some, was noteworthy for, I guess, for all the wrong reasons. But you get what I'm saying. Like, the idea that, like, no one could buy the show, but because we're listed on the pay-per-view guide, people will be interested. I mean, if they were interested, they would buy the show. So that's obviously completely silly. I don't know. I get the idea. Like, anything's worth a try, right? But maybe they overcommitted. Like, try 1 or 2, not like sign a contract for a bunch and change your whole booking model because of it. I don't know. But I guess the idea that it was an impetus to sign people to contracts was probably, I guess, one good thing for the company that came out of this.
Although we're talking about this being no low risk for ROH. That, and Kerry Silkin started to give some guys some level of health coverage, and we'll get into a cost during the show that they incurred. They did incur extra costs as a result of doing pay-per-view. And Matt, we are almost through this, actually a little bit ahead of schedule. There's got one long thing. I got one Observer clip here, one little brief thing, and then we're going to do some. You and I are going to read something, Matt. We're going to Between the Sheets this. It's going to be an interview between Wade and Gabe. You get to decide who you want to be. But so we'll go quickly to the Observer for one other wrinkle to all of this, which is Dave wrote, the Respecters Earned ROH pay-per-view will debut on different dates with different systems. In Demand, which is the largest station it will be on, won't debut the show until Friday, July 20th at 8 p.m. There will be replays through the end of August. TVN will debut at Sunday, July 8th at 8 p.m. with replays for the rest of the month. The Dish Network gets the earliest debut on Sunday, July 1st, and then there will be at least 10 replays during July. The lack of a consistent start day and time does them no favors as far as the outside publicizing. As far as the audience they already have, I think those people will buy it, and others who have heard about the product but have never seen it for reasons it never came near enough to where they live would likely sample. Watching the last set of DVDs with an eye to it as a pay-per-view, it's hard to say as a show. The production values will kill it with mainstream fans, but you're not going to get many of them to order it in the first place. On a DVD, there are several matches that are there to get people over underneath that wouldn't play well on pay-per-view, but also don't look like they'll be on the pay-per-view. The most up-to-date DVD I have would be on the second night from Detroit, and from a wrestling standpoint, it's a hell of a show. It's a major learning curve because, for example, nobody in the world is going to know Naruki Doi, Jack Evans, Shima, or Nigel McGuinness. However, the live crowd does treat them as stars, and that's part of the battle as far as long-term goes. But with TNA, you watch it on free TV, and the live crowd treats plenty of those guys as stars, and some like Angle and Sting have pretty damn big names, and it's not like they're gaining ground. From the first taping, you could see the idea of building angles on one show to build for the next, which is the only way to make it work. But without TV, that means the only people seeing the angles are your existing customer base. That's why whatever growth of new customers is still going to be small, but it does elevate guys to a degree. It won't make them national names, but events being on pay-per-view and guys working main events does elevate the profile of the top guys and the promotion. But in today's environment, pay-per-view is very tough business live unless you are the established major major league brand in your genre and nearly impossible to do big money in when not live. Then PW Torch would add to that. ROH has no say in when the pay-per-views begin running. It is up to the pay-per-view providers to determine when they run respect is earned, which explains the difference in the timetable between when each cable provider is airing the show. So yeah, that was one other thing with this too, which was it wasn't like, oh, the pay-per-view is going to debut in one time on one date for the whole country or continent, and we're all going to get to talk about it together and stuff. This is another thing I feel like I agree kind of hurt it, which was it came out in drips and drabs depending on where you lived and what your cable provider was. And ROH had no control over that. So like another weird thing that happened. So Matt, if you can go to the Through the Years Gmail account, I have sent an email to it, and it has a script for an excerpt, not the whole thing, a Wade Keller Torch talk between him and Gabe Sapolsky. This is what we're going to end on.
This is very exciting.
There's one or two things I want to talk about. And we don't normally do this, but this is so long. I was like, we have to break this up. And it'll go easier, I think, this way. Matt, you can be Wade. You can be Gabe. It's time to do a little role playing. Keep things spicy.
I think I'll be Wade.
Sounds good.
So you just want me to get started on this?
Yeah, sure. So this was a Torch talk Wade and Gabe did. And I think they did it like probably the day the pay-per-view was announced, because I don't know if it's in the clip, the excerpt I have here, but there's a part that alludes to like, will TNA pull their talent? So clearly that happened very shortly after. So this must have been right when they announced it. But yeah, let's get through this and then we'll get to the show.
All right. This is beginning an interview conducted by me, Wade Keller, who has, since I have recently been behind a paywall on the Torch. You haven't been on it this run yet, although it's coming soon, right? But anyway.
Yeah.
All right. How long has this been an idea, and where did you first hear about it, or did you come up with it yourself?
It was basically done by Carrie Silken and Sidek in our office. Okay, that's me editorializing. Carrie was looking for a way to expand our customer base, basically. This all happened since fall of last year. I'm not sure of the specific year. I don't know what the fuck that means.
That's got to be a typo.
Basically, we got to the point where every fan who was willing to shell out for a 15 or 20 bucks and send it to a website of small company for a DVD, there's some transcription here, we got all those fans. We showed growth, but it was slow. You pick up a fan here or there, you lose a fan here or there too. They get burned out or tired or whatever. So we needed a way to get more exposure. What this pay-per-view deal does is give us a way to get more exposure and at a real affordable rate. The business plan of ROH has not changed. We're still going to be a company that lives or dies on DVD or live ticket event sales. The pay-per-view is just basically a way to get more exposure, to get the ROHWrestling.com name out there or the Ring of Honor name out there and reach an audience that otherwise isn't going to buy our DVD.
What do you picture at this point being the cross promotion, other than someone happening to flip across ROH pay-per-view on their on-demand channel guide?
There's lots of plans for promotion. We have a very big guy with Ken Gelman involved in all of this who's handling all of this.
I feel like that's an insult to Ken Gelman.
This guy is rotund. He has a very good background.
Yeah, not that there's anything wrong with that. Never mind. I'm already putting my foot in my mouth. Just keep going. Sorry.
But just let me reread the first part of this quote. Just I just want you to keep in your mind how vague this is. Like, this is, I don't even know, like, you would read this and go, does Gabe even know who Ken Gelman is? Because just listen to this again. There's lots of plans for promotion. We have a very big guy with Ken Gelman involved in all of this who's handling all of this. He has a very good background. He really, really knows what he is doing. I have a lot of trust and faith in him. He has a lot of good ideas. He's a real go-getter. He's going to have a lot of ways to promote this pay-per-view.
I just want to say, this sounds like a quote from Trump. No, because that's why I mentioned like the joke about insulting him. Because remember Trump a few months ago? It's like, oh, there's this really major guy, and he's really big, and I told him to get on the shot, and it's not working. Ha 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 ha! But he's a really good guy. He has a good background. He knows what he's really knows what he's doing. He has a lot of good ideas. He's a real go-getter. Doesn't it kind of sound like a Trumpy thing to say?
Yeah. Well, it also sounds like. He doesn't name one. He just keeps saying over and over again, he has good ideas. He doesn't name one idea. Like, well, could you tell us what they are? And like, it just sounds, it sounds like either Trump or like someone trying to bullshit their way from through an English essay they didn't study for, which is, I guess is like a similar person. So
he's a go-getter. Like that's a wild thing to say, I think. Right,
no. Okay. So Keller, continue.
There will probably be a lot of people seeing ads for ROH after WWE pay-per-views conclude too. There are a lot of ways being on pay-per-view raises your profile. My first reaction to this is there are going to be a lot of people who are not in the habit of buying DVDs through mail order. They'll see the pay-per-view option and they'll order it, and then want more of that product than once every 2 months. Wow, Gabe is very bullish on this.
It really is all of that exposure. Very important to us. To us was the price point. These pay-per-views are going to be priced between $9.95 and $14.95. That's a very affordable price. And it's a price where you don't have to watch on Sunday at 8 o'clock to sit and watch it or you miss it. I always thought TNA had a good idea with the Wednesday pay-per-view, and it didn't work out for whatever reason. But you did have to watch it on Wednesday night. With On Demand, it will be on all month. You might be sitting there at 1 in the morning and you have nothing to do and you want to spend $10. It's not a big deal. You go ahead and buy it. It's going to be very convenient for the people and very affordable. It's going to be huge. That's the main thing. I think it will. That was the huge thing. Was not. That's the main thing. I think it will attract a lot of impulse buys that are that way, and we're also hoping that there are casual fans. We're not asking a whole lot. You're not going to have to shell out a whole lot. It's not $30 or $40. It costs $10 or $15 for 2 hours of your time. So this thing about Gabe here, it's like. It's kind of funny.
It's gonna get billions and billions of people to order it.
Well, it's funny that he's like, I don't know why that TNA pay-per-view thing didn't work after Dave and the Observer just went through like the TNA thing was an awful when they first did weekly pay-per-views for 1995 was an awful failure. Even Jeff and Jerry would tell you that now. And then you cut to Gabe on the Torch Talk being like, I thought that was a great idea. I don't know why that didn't work. And it was just like, well, you might be about to find out.
Yeah, so, it's also very funny that he's picturing his potential customer being someone sad and alone at 1 a.m, being like, all right, well, you know what? I'm going to stay up for 2 more hours and watch this random thing that I just bought on pay-per-view.
You know what, Matt? I do feel seen when it comes to that. That is part of the base. That was me.
Yeah, still. But still, I mean, can we create a whole company just on you? I feel like not even ROH could do that.
The scarred babies, they have sad lives. They need ROH. But Wade, I guess we can keep going.
Is there a number of buys that In Demand is looking for or a neighborhood? In your own mind, do you have a number you need to reach to make it sustainable? Or is this arrangement just so cheap for In Demand and something you were already doing where there's almost not a threshold you need to reach?
The amazing part of this is there really isn't pressure for a lot of buys. In Demand has a lot of things going on, and this is just another product for them to sell. For us, it's all about exposure. It's about getting more people to buy the DVDs and come to the live events and putting the ROHWrestling.com name out there and the Ring of Honor name. It's not really a high pressure, we have to do this number of buys, or we have to put this much more money into the company, and it's going to be this much more expensive to run the shows. The fact of the matter is, it's all very affordable, and it's become a really innovative and great way to get some exposure.
Man, the more I read this, the more it's like, this is such a silly idea. They're just like, yeah, I mean, it's great. We could just, hopefully some slob at 1 a.m. can put their private parts away to order our pay-per-view instead. And we don't even have to be successful. It's fine. They said, hey, it's cool. You guys could just do whatever. And I don't know. It's like, it's pretty... I don't know. They're not doing a great job of making this sound like it's going to be like some great thing. You know what I mean?
I will say it's easy in hindsight knowing how everything turned out for us to be more critical. And like I do agree.
That's the point of the show, Trevor, is that we get to act smart in hindsight.
I think we both said, and Dave said in the Observer, like, look, I agree with the it's worth a shot, but I think where I really agree with you is so much of this is not like, oh, this is going to be really exciting. Like, there is some of that in the promotion from Gabe and stuff, but a lot of this is more like, yeah, it's not going to hurt us if this doesn't work. Like right. It's very much we're dipping our toe in the water, which doesn't make you want to like run to see it, right? Like,
yeah.
It's not going to hurt.
That's why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying Gabe is a weird person to be selling it because he's clearly not that excited about it himself. So he's not like hyping it up like it's a big deal. He's just like, yeah, whatever, man. 1 a.m.
Yeah, like this is the opposite of the Paul Heyman at Barely Legal. This is the dance. You've made it to the dance hype up. This is like, you know what? If you screw up the dance, no one's at this dance. It doesn't matter. We just hope to have a good time. If it doesn't have a good time, who gives a shit? Who likes dances anyway? Like
everyone watching the show is going to be the saddest of losers. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, you know what? You know what this is? I just realized it's how you and I would promote a pay-per-view. It's like
Yes.
no pressure. If it goes wrong, we didn't care that much anyway. Like, don't worry,
Yeah.
you don't have to watch it.
I mean,
It's
it's
us.
literally how we talk about the show. So I think you're exactly right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the actual wrestling promotion version of Through the Years. So that's pretty scary.
which may explain why. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, yes. All right. Wade Keller says the technology changes are changing the landscape for what a pro wrestling company can do to sustain itself. That's been one of the great things about ROH. Not that you've reached the ceiling on growth, but you're not expanding at a rate where you're looking at going public in a few months. It's nice to be able to be at a certain level, be profitable, employ wrestlers, have a good time doing what you're doing, and not grow too fast like ECW did, where the next move is, quote, make or break.
it's not where we're going to be in a situation where we're going to be too big to be small and too small to be big, which was the famous Paul Heyman line about ECW, which was true. When Kerry first came to me with the idea about the pay-per-view, I was dead set against it because I was really worried about that. I figured we're going to take on the same problems ECW did. But the fact of the matter is we haven't had any of those problems, and I'm 100% excited about it now because it really is the next logical step for the company at this point. We're not overextending ourselves with it. We're not drastically changing our business plan. We're not going to have to change our product at all. We're still going to be able to put our product out there. It really is the next logical step for our company to take.
From a production standpoint, has Indemand asked anything of you, first of all? And second of all, will you be upgrading any aspects of production? I like that Wade is just like, I mean, you doing anything? Yeah, you gonna put any sort of foot forward on this?
Wait till you get to Wade's
got
next.
to that. Yeah.
Wait till you get to Wade's next question. But Gabe goes, there will be small upgrades, but Indemand hasn't said anything to us. In fact, they've seen numerous tapes of our product and DVDs of our product, and they're very happy with it. There will be some production upgrades because we always making production upgrades. It's just something we always try to do. It might not be anything too noticeable, just little things here and there to clean the product up a little bit.
What about the ring mic?
If you started watching the DVD from the beginning of this year, you'll see we had the ring mic wired right into the audio now. So there's no issues with the ring mic anymore.
Oh, excellent. Other than that, from a production standpoint, the rest of it has to do with the building you're in and the crowd you have. The lighting is consistent.
I just love that. Like, Wade always complained about the audio on these pay-per-views. In fact, he does, I mean, on ROH shows. In fact, he does it for this pay-per-view. So I love that, like, Wade basically snuck that one in for himself. And then also Gabe's just like, well, have you been watching the DVDs this year? Like, because they did change it. But
yeah, but I do think it's funny that he said the lighting is consistent. Like, how many shows is this guy? This guy doesn't watch that many shows that he would even know that. And they still have weird shit with the white balance backstage. Like, come on.
That's one of the reasons we wanted to do things in Manhattan, because we're going to get a tremendous crowd in there and a tremendous crowd reaction. We have to keep in mind the building we're taping things in. We obviously want a great looking building. You're not going to suddenly see pyro or lots of fancy things to compete with WWE and TNA. That's another lesson from ECW. We're not going to go the exact opposite route that ECW went, because I look back at some of that ECW stuff and it just looks terrible. But we're going to have a nice standard of production, but we're not going to try and compete with TNA or WWE. We're going to have our own look, and it's a look I'm very comfortable with. It's an old school look, but it's updated. I think it's very pleasant on the eye. If you want huge production, this isn't going to be the product for you. If you want a nice looking product with all the emphasis on wrestling, that's what we're still going to be. Matt, we've rewatched every single ROH show up to this point in its history. Has the phrase "very pleasant on the eye" ever popped into your head?
Yeah, no, it hasn't. That's not the draw, is it? For anything with ROH? No, I would agree. Has it? What would you say about the look?
I mean, it's gotten. They've gotten to the point where it does the job. It is highly watchable. There are less of the distracting, what the fuck are you doing things, but they still, to your point, occasionally happen. But
yeah, there's not as many, like they go into the crowd and it gets pitch black, but there are still occasionally points where they follow someone backstage and it's pitch black. That still happens.
But I would not call this like a pleasant old school look.
No, definitely not.
It looks like an indie that's getting through it.
Yes. All right, Wade. If you're not at a point where you can come even close to what WWE is, you're going to look foolish trying. ROH has an alternative look to it where I think people who have discovered it feel they're part of an exclusive club of people who have discovered something special. I think that more than makes up for the fact that it's not at the most up-to-date arena with all the pyro.
The fans who buy this product, that's not what they're buying this product for anyways. It's not something we're concerned about. You're not going to see a changed product. We're not suddenly going to go on pay-per-view and you're going to see a Randy Savage or something. You're going to see the same product you've seen over the last 5 years. That's the other beautiful part of this whole arrangement, is that it does not change the integrity of the product whatsoever. We still have no one we really have to answer to. We just have to send a tape in and they play it. You're going to see the same product. We're going to feature our guys, the guys you've seen in Ring of Honor, and the guys who have signed contracts with us, and those you have come to expect in Ring of Honor. You're going to see the pure Ring of Honor product. It's not going to have to be altered in any way.
Was there any concern at all, or anything you were aware of, that put the long-term or short-term future of ROH in jeopardy if something wasn't done to add the revenue stream, such as this pay-per-view, and expand the audience base? Or were things solid enough where you weren't content, but you could have stayed the course for a while?
We could stay course and sputter along and gain a few customers and lose a few customers, but the bottom line is Kerry's a businessman and he's not in this to just stand pat. He wants to see growth. He doesn't need to see an overnight overwhelming success. He just wants to see a slow, steady growth. We kind of reached a point where we weren't growing, but it was just slow. So slow. So I don't know if the Torch transcription meant to say that we kind of reached a point where we were growing, because otherwise the sentence doesn't make sense. But because the way it comes out here is we kind of reached a point where we weren't growing, but it was just so slow and we were doing it for 5 years. And it's just like, what does it take to get new fans? And bottom line is we need that TV exposure. We could have gone along and kept coasting. Some months we make money. Maybe some months we don't. The bottom line is we needed this in order to not expand to the next level, but just expand our fan base a little bit and get that extra level of exposure. I love that Gabe couldn't even bring himself to say that they didn't make money some months. Some months we make money. Maybe some months we don't. Just say it. Say the words.
Yes, I agree. But, he's speaking for the owner, I guess, and it's not him. He's trying to be as honest as he can, but there are some confining elements to what he can say. All right, Keller. You can say you don't comment on this because I know you generally don't, but you've never sold more than 10,000 DVDs of any one event.
Yeah, I can't really discuss that.
So can we just stay for a second? Do we think they've even come close to selling 10,000 DVDs of any one event? Honest question, I wasn't trying to be funny. Does that sound plausible?
I don't even know the business of this stuff. I think there might have been an Observer thing that maybe a quote come out that kind of gives an idea, or I forget. I forget that we had a quote on a recent episode, I think, where Dave mentioned how much PWG sold for its highest DVDs, and I don't remember how much it was, but it was not close to 10,000. Not
right.
Even so. Yeah.
Now, for people who weren't paying attention to DVD before, it's worth letting them know that nobody was becoming a multi-millionaire on the DVD sales. I think that's part of the reason Ring of Honor fans are so loyal and passionate about it. That it's a passion on your part and the wrestler's part. There aren't 10 guys making 7 figures.
Yeah, I mean, that's all true. No one's making millions or getting rich off of Ring of Honor.
What other things would you do besides a pay-per-view taped at one event?
Right now, there's really no limits on what's available for us to do. I have a lot of ideas up in my head. Half of them I'll throw out. Half of them will develop into something else. It's really too early to get into that. We'll see how the first one goes and moves from there. There's a lot of good options on how we can do things, whether we tape all in one night or tape a match here and there or have a theme or spotlight some of our history. Because if you make a new fan, they have over 100 back catalog DVDs to buy from us. So our history will be a big part of things. Maybe not our first pay-per-view, but that's something to consider. There are a lot of options to consider in the future. And again, I will just say they don't consider other options. This is basically what they're doing.
Yeah. This is a softball question that I'll phrase negatively, and you could turn it into a positive. ECW, when they went on pay-per-view, the feeling was if they had only gotten on pay-per-view 2 years earlier when the product hit its peak, it might have worked. Is there any fear on your part that Ring of Honor peaked a year or two ago, and entering this pay-per-view phase, you'll get a lot of new fans, but the long-time hardcore fans will say it's not quite what it was a year or two ago?
I don't know if I agree about that ECW peaking thing. I might not agree with your initial statement. As far as looking at Ring of Honor, every year in December around Christmas time, I evaluate the past year, and every December 1st, I go into a panic wondering how we're going to top the previous year, and every year we manage to top it. We have a great crew signed. All of our core guys are in place, super talented guys, so the talent is there. Everyone is really happy. It's been an amazing team effort so far. I think you're going to see it all come together. Before, in the first phase of ROH, people look at the Low Keys and the Samoa Joes and the Chris Daniels and the Paul Londons and the AJs. Those were the stars that filled ROH. Now we're going to the next level, and we have the guys like Bryan Danielson and the Nigels and the Briscoes and the Noah talent and the Claudios and the Brent Albrights, and the list goes on and on. We have an extremely talented core of wrestlers right now, and I think they're all going to come through.
Just interesting to see like that Gabe was still considering Brent on that level.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we all got our taste. I think with my ECW analogy, the timing might have been better placed on their national TV deal in terms of them having peaked. Some people thought the talent roster was stronger a couple years before they finally got on national television.
I definitely agree with that, but I definitely don't think we're in that same situation now. So, Matt, this is the last thing before I'll have a few notes to start off the start of the show, but it'll be about the pay-per-view. But this is like the end of our news coverage, thankfully. But I want to say one thing that really came to mind when I was reading this researching it, which is, I don't know when ROH's creative peak ends. Like revisiting, I think a lot of people would consider ROH's creative peak to be somewhere between 2004 to somewhere in 2007, and some people might give or take a year on one of the ends or not. I just showed you a quote Athena said in a media interview this week. I showed you that yesterday, where she was saying that she still loves watching 2003, 2006 Ring of Honor. For me, I would say the creative peak starts around the Reborn shows in mid 2004, right after the Feinstein scandal. And I don't know when the peak ends. I don't know the creative peak. I don't know if we're going to get to a point where it's going to become really clear, or maybe it'll just kind of ebb and flow up and down. But what I can say is I do think this moment, the pay-per-view, is kind of the start of a new phase and the end of maybe a certain kind of business peak, in the sense of ROH since its beginning up to this point in the coverage and everything, it's always run one way, which is our entire company is based off live ticket sales and selling the DVD, and that's what we do, and everything apart from a very brief window during the Feinstein scandal where Dave reported, that both Kerry and Feinstein had lost six figures each supporting the company. Before that, and not long after that, in not just the Observer, but all the newsletters, in the interviews with Gabe has always, the word they always put out was, the company isn't losing money, it's self-sustaining, and the coverage here is the first time they acknowledge that something has to change. You can hear Gabe still doesn't want to admit that maybe they're not in a great place, but even he is now starting to say with something he's never said before, which is, oh, we gain fans, but we lose fans. We make money some months, we lose money some months. And again, Kerry nowadays, when he's in media interviews, he will tell you ROH never made him money. Maybe it did on a given month, but and I it was suggested to me recently on YouTube. I guess he did a Rip Rogers podcast, and there was a clip, and I clicked on it, and they're like, how great was Ring of Honor? And he's like, yeah, it was great, but it was financial poison to me. He goes out of his way to be like, I was losing fucking money on this thing. And I think what I mean when I say this was kind of the end of an era was, this is the first of a chain of actions where Kerry has clearly decided, I can't keep the business model has to change somehow because I'm not happy where we are. Ring of Honor is now on a clock, because if you look what happens, they tried the pay-per-view. A year after this, when the pay-per-view is not changing things, he fires Gabe. Shortly after that, they get on TV. And then after they give TV a good, honest effort run for a year or so, that final countdown show, the Bryan Danielson Nigel farewell show, Kerry is about to shut the company down, unbeknownst to anyone at the time, until Jim Cornette hooks him up with Sinclair Broadcasting to buy the company. So I think clearly we're at the point now where Kerry has decided, if things don't change in the next 2 or 3 years, I'm done. And I think if you read between the lines, you can definitely see that in the tone now.
Yeah, this is just kind of would you describe it as a desperation move?
I mean, obviously they try a few different things, but it's the start of them going, we can't stay the same. And it was interesting. I was listening to the An Honorable Mention podcast episode on this show, and Shane mentioned at the time here, he described that ROH's DVD sales at this point were not slow, but they were slowing. That they were not to the extent of '05 and '06. He says they were not as slow as they would get to in upcoming years. The way he put it was, at this time, it still took more than one person to do the business of fulfilling all of ROH's DVD orders. And in future years, the DVD orders would be low enough that one person could handle it all. So, yeah, it is maybe the start of something where they are not maybe it sounds like not in a desperate situation yet, but they are starting to see erosion, maybe.
Yeah, I feel like they've probably seen erosion even before, but yeah, and that's, I know this is probably a conversation for a different time. I start to get on my analysis hat, like how much did the slowing down in late 2006 of the quality start to affect that? How much was it just inevitable no matter what the quality is? But I guess we could save that conversation for another
Yeah.
time.
The oversaturation of running more shows than ever. Yeah, another time, because now, Matt, we will get to. I think we'll get a reasonable hour through this show, but we'll get to Respect is Earned. Took place May 12th, 2007 at the Manhattan Center in New York City, New York, in front of a reported sellout crowd of 1,250 fans. Dave wrote in The Observer, the show drew a hot sellout crowd of 1,250 fans, although they did begin to tire by the end, credited to the fact that the first hour was so strong it was hard for the second hour to follow. It was drawn with no matches announced, as they wanted to present it similar to Raw, where angles on the show would lead to matches. The show itself went 4 hours and will be edited down to a 2-hour pay-per-view show with no editing being done of individual matches. Reports were that every key match on the show was good. There were no matches of the year, although some said Briscoes versus Claudio Castagnoli and Matt Sydal wasn't far off. But when it was over, Gabe Sapolsky said it went better than he had expected. There was definitely a vibe that they had produced a show that they didn't think TNA could touch. Of course, this was probably the one weekend TNA could and did. People, if you're wondering what Dave is referring to, the day after ROH taped this pay-per-view, TNA ran their Sacrifice pay-per-view, and that show had, I looked up the card, I don't really remember it, but it had Kurt Angle, Sting, and Christian in a three-way for the world title, Samoa Joe versus AJ Styles, and Chris Harris versus James Storm in a Texas death match. So on paper, looks pretty decent. Brian Alvarez wrote in Figure 4 Weekly, the only major complaint we heard from fans was that it was insufferably hot in the building, which is bad enough normally, but far worse here since this show went in excess of 4 hours. It wasn't supposed to go that long, but Gabe Sapolsky said many guys went over their time cues by 5 minutes or so, and when you have that many matches, it's an extra 15 to 20 minutes. Some of the matches are not going to make the cut for this reason, though some were not going to make the cut anyway since there's only a 2-hour window, not 3. That's what DVD is for. And then finally, our last note, then we'll finally get to the show. I just include this because it made me laugh. Sean Radican wrote in the PW Torch when he watched the DVD, I really liked the second hard camera angle, which made it look like you were watching the show through a peephole, which reinforced the feeling that ROH was some sort of secret underground wrestling promotion. I love watching wrestling through a peephole, man.
Could you imagine like just sitting by like a door watching like a 4-hour show through a peephole?
It's like the Foo Fighters music video for Monkey Ranch. It's just a crowd of people around a peephole trying to watch that show. But so yeah, we're gonna watch this show what we're gonna do is the way the DVD came, which is we're gonna watch the 2-hour pay-per-view, the way people would see what people would see if they just ordered the pay-per-view, and then we're gonna watch the hour bonus DVD of all the other extra matches and segments that didn't make the pay-per-view. So what we're gonna cover here is the pay-per-view. Matt, you were there live. Was it hot?
I don't remember it being hot. Like I guess it probably wasn't not hot, but yeah, I was always up in the balcony because again, man of the people. But I just remember being excited that they were going to do something special because it was all a surprise, and I remember it being a hot crowd, and I remember I'll get to my final. Okay, so I'll just say this right off the bat. I remember being slightly disappointed with it when it happened. That does not necessarily reflect how I feel about it now. But I remember thinking like I was not necessarily just expecting high quality wrestling, but like big major events happening and big matches that I would have been anticipating seeing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of the same thoughts, which I guess when we like end the pay-per-view point, we'll probably be able to sum it up. But we opened the first ever ROH pay-per-view with an ROH graphic, as we can already hear fans somewhere chanting ROH. We then cut to a graphic that says, in association with G-Funk Sports Entertainment, which just never fails to make me laugh. The idea of ROH being like the prestigious series, and then it's with G-Funk. And then, anyway, we then cut
We got
to
the
BJ.
funk. Okay,
We then cut to I heard this Gelman guy, he's a big man, but we then cut to BJ with
he's a real
in the
go-getter.
ring.
The G stands for go-getter.
Go get her, Funk. We then cut to BJ Whitmer in the ring with a mic as the crowd explodes into a huge ovation they were probably prompted to do for this moment. The hard cam immediately pans to the left and then the right to show us a full Manhattan Center, the rafters full with the Matt Feuersteins of the world. We get a huge ROH chant as Whitmer welcomes us to Ring of Honor. BJ says the first thing you need to know about ROH is we let our wrestling do our talking. So BJ says let's not waste any more time. If there's anyone who wants to fight him right now, he's calling them out. We then cut to a montage of wrestlers making their entrances tonight.
So I was going to say this is, in my opinion, a bad intro. Like of wrestler, like they should like. Why wouldn't they do action as opposed to people making their entrances?
Yeah, and we get a graphic that says respect is earned. When that ends, Takeshi Morishima comes out to no theme music, world titles in his mouth. He gets a huge chant, attacks Whitmer. ROH's first ever pay-per-view match is on, so if you want that for trivia, yeah. Oh, by the way, Matt, I saw this, and I don't know if someone made it recently or just discovered. I saw it when I was looking at a Discord somewhere. You know how we talked about last time how there'd be a crazy Sporkle quiz to get like everyone who's fought for the ROH World Title, because of that weird foreign defense that Morishima had. Someone has made that Sporkle quiz.
Like it, like it already existed, or they made it based on you suggesting?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check, but it might be that they made it because they listened to us. I think they referenced us when they were plugging it or something.
Wow.
ROH World Title match. This is the first match if you're make a new Sporkle quiz. The first ever ROH pay-per-view match. Takeshi Morishima defeated BJ Whitmer via pinfall in 2 minutes 52 seconds after he hit a backdrop driver. Matt, what'd you think? I thought this was pretty much them doing like the last 3 minutes of like a longer match.
That's literally what I wrote. It's the last 2 minutes of a longer match between these two. Like it was obviously all just big bombs, you know, like they just hit all their big moves, had a lot of kickouts, Whitmer, hitting a frog splash, a lariat. Morishima, a lariat himself, backdrop driver got the win, so it wasn't quite as dramatic as maybe an actual finish between a match where these two guys were trying to have a great match. But, I'm not totally sure if I like it, but the crowd was so hot that it seemed hot. Like, I get the idea. They wanted to make Morishima seem like a monster. I don't know that it makes sense for BJ Whitmer to be squashed like that, given that he's been presented as competitive with, top guys, and he sort of comes off as a little bit of a jobber here because the match was so short, even though, like, it wasn't like a total squash. But I guess that's to lead to a storyline later. And I guess you can't argue with, okay, we're going to get over our dominant champion. The crowd is going crazy for him. He seems over. The show seems to be over. So, it wasn't a good match because it was so short. It was entertaining. The crowd was hot. It was probably effective. So, even though it wasn't my favorite thing, I can't really complain about it.
I would have had Morishima showcase more of his athleticism here. Like, I know by the nature of this pay-per-view, anyone who bought it was going to see Morishima again at the end of the show with a more fleshed out match, and you need to save some stuff for this. But this pay-per-view was intended to grab new fans, and you get one shot at that pure first impression. And, Morishima here hits running big boots, lariats, one backdrop driver, but we don't get any of, like, the special athletic things he can do, like the cartwheel into the corner attack or the top rope drop kick. I would have liked him to uncork just one of those two things here, just one. And I actually would have had Morishima more dominant here. Like, I felt like Whitmer does lose very quickly, 3 minutes, but he gets half the offense here. And given how important Morishima's going to be for the rest of the year for ROH. Again, if we're talking about first impressions, I would have had him just take the entire match. Like, BJ is starting up a losing streak gimmick, and he's losing in under 3 minutes either way. So to me, I would be like, he can take the hit this time. But yeah, it was fun for what it was. I don't, about this, whether this should have been the first impression ROH gives or not. I don't know. It's not the worst. It's not the best. The crowd was super hot for this. They popped for everything. They chant for Morishima. They even chant for Whitmer at one point.
The important thing we all have to remember when we're analyzing this is, as Gabe made very clear multiple times, quote, none of this shit matters. It's all bullshit. No one even has to watch it. It works either way. So that's the real important point to remember.
I will say you and your brethren in New York, Matt, all the ROH fans in New York, as always, did a great job in terms of this is probably one of the loudest crowds ROH has ever had up to this point in their history, I would say. They do a couple things I'll get to later I don't enjoy, but this is a crowd almost feels like it's one of those crowds you get occasionally where the crowd's almost performing as well because they know what a big show it is, because they are really just very loud and vocal, I would say, for the entire show, pretty much. And after the match, Morishima gets a huge ovation, and Nigel McGuinness walks to the ring, also with no music, also getting a huge ovation. On commentary, Prazak calls Nigel top challenger Nigel McGuinness, which seems a little weird given that Nigel just lost clean to Morishima 3 shows earlier, but whatever. The crowd chants, "Fuck him up, Nigel, fuck him up." Nigel says he'll get to that in a second. He tells Morishima that was one hell of a title match, and he's one hell of a wrestler. But then again, so was Nigel. Nigel wants to put his name in the hat to be the next guy that challenges Morishima for the belt. He doesn't care if it's in London, England, Tokyo, Japan, or right here tonight in New York City, which gets a huge pop. Then out comes Bryan Danielson, also with no music, in dress clothes, including a snazzy maroon shirt to pay tribute to his classic maroon William Regal tights that Regal gave him. Bryan says, "Wait a second, someone is back in the house after a 5-month absence." The crowd pops big, and Dave Prazak on commentary immediately says, "Former world champion Bryan Danielson's back after a 5-month absence," which, yes, Dave, Bryan literally said the exact same words like 2 seconds earlier.
Yeah, they're going super literal to explain every single thing that's going on.
Yeah.
I honestly, it's funny, but I also don't mind it. The other thing I found funny was that Danielson was wearing a red dress shirt, and I think this is the most dressed up I can ever remember seeing him outside of like a WWE Hall of Fame ceremony or something like that.
That's how big the show was. They had to get him to dress up.
Yes.
But and by that I mean wear a dress shirt.
Yes.
Bryan gets into the ring and he gets in Nigel's face, poking him in the chest over and over as he talks about how he was ROH champion for 15 months and he was the best wrestler in the world. Bryan recaps they took out Lance Storm, Samoa Joe, Homicide, and Nigel McGuinness.
So when he mentions Storm, Samoa Joe, Homicide, he's mentioning people that like are mainstream to the audience, people that are on TV, like the people who watch wrestling on TV would know, like that. That's like who he makes clear to mention.
Yeah, he should have said, it didn't happen on ROH. I beat
Colt Cabana, Xavier,
Kamala.
Yeah.
so he goes.
Kamala's mainstream.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, he's actually a mainstream. So Bryan goes, "So if anyone is getting a world title shot tonight, it's me." Nigel says that Bryan keeps shoving that finger at him. He's going to break it off and shove it down his throat. Bryan bigs off, but the second Nigel looks away, Bryan attacks him with a cheap shot, and the two start brawling. But Morishima quickly joins in. He attacks Nigel after a quick stare between Bryan and Morishima. They seem to come to an understanding, and they both team up on Nigel. Bryan grabs Morishima's ROH title belt and says, "This is his belt." Morishima snatches it away and leaves the ring. And as Bryan is distracted by that, Nigel recovers and he wants to fight Bryan. But Bryan bails outside the ring and says he doesn't need that crap. So this was the Raw-style opening that Gabe was apparently telling Dave he was going to do.
Which is very bizarre to me that was what he decided would be something to emulate, but on a pay-per-view no less, but whatever.
Yeah, it's Gabe wanting to do something that he doesn't do very often, and he did kind of do this vibe with the impromptu main event on Manhattan Mayhem, and I think we both agreed that was to great effect. That was a great show, and I think we described that show as like the one time Gabe tried to do ECW, and he did actually really, really well.
That was after an already scheduled main event.
Exactly, and this feels like it's this is kind of a theme for a few things on this show where it's not bad, but it doesn't grab you. Like, it's fine. It's a fine way to start building it to a main event, but it's not something where I leave going, I really know the characters or I'm really excited for the match. It's like it's a justification for a match. It's not boring, but it's not gripping.
I probably liked the segment more than you did because it was so hot, like the crowd was going so
Yeah.
crazy for all of it. But what I was annoyed by, was not even something related to the pay-per-view. It was just more like the continuity. Why did they have Danielson come back the night before as a babyface and do almost nothing if he was just going to make like, a more impactful return here and act totally like a heel? Like, I don't
hmm
understand, like, why? Why don't understand that inconsistency? It doesn't seem necessary. It seems weird, if anything.
Another interesting thing is you pointed out how you thought was very pointed that Brian was naming like the biggest names he could to try and get some credibility. That was, I'm sure, by design because there was another part Dave pointed out was by design. Dave wrote in the Observer about this promo. Nigel challenged Morishima and said it doesn't matter if it's in London, Tokyo, or New York. Obviously, this was to establish that ROH is something more than this small group that most first-time viewers would immediately think it was. I still guess 95% of new viewers would think they were full of shit about London and Tokyo, but by the end of the show, there were more references to those cities, like noting when Morishima versus Kenta for the ROH title headlined Budokan Hall, called the Madison Square Garden of Tokyo, before 13,500 fans. Dave writes in parentheses, well, that's what was announced. I think that was smart because by the end, it really did seem like something a whole lot bigger than it started out as. So yeah, I noticed that too. That I do think there's a few times they are trying to stress like the things they've done. Like hey, we go to other countries. Hey, some names you've heard of have been here. Like they're trying to do some of that, and we will get. Guys, this is the rare ROH show Dave watched the whole thing of. We will get Dave's thoughts and star ratings throughout the night, along with Wade Keller. So that'll be interesting. We then cut to a music video for Brent Albright, starting with a graphic that says "Coming soon to ROH pay-per-view."
Which is how I mentioned before. Gabe really still thinks of Albright as a big deal to promote, even though it doesn't seem like his performances have warranted that. But
yeah, like
it's
I've been hard on him on the podcast. He's been a little bit better than my memory. He's had a couple highlight performances, like the tables match with Whitmer. But yeah, like Gabe, this feels like one of those Gabe bookings where I think we can see that's not going to work out a little ways before Gabe can. But anyway, the graphic says "Coming soon to ROH pay-per-view." As we see Albright highlights, Brent does a voiceover saying that if you have something you need done, he has a price. He'll snap your neck with the half Nelson suplex. He wants money, and there are only two ways to get it: win titles and take payoffs. In his world, it's get out or tap out. He'll put your shoulder right off its joint with the crowbar. He's Brent Albright. He's the gun for hire. I felt like this was a very ECW non-ROH like opening between the setting up of the impromptu main event and then this highlight package for Albright. I did feel like it was kind of effective for Albright, actually, with the negative being it's for Brent Albright. But I didn't think it was a terrible quick highlight package. And that brings us, Matt, to Naomichi Marufuji defeating Rocky Romero via pinfall in 16 minutes, 4 seconds after hitting the Shiranui. Rocky and Marufuji get highlight packages of past matches and fancy little graphics as they make their way to the ring, and they both come out to theme music as well. So that'll be something to note throughout the night, which is who has theme music and who doesn't, because ROH couldn't license a lot of the big ticket ones. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Matt, how would you like to talk about this match?
Well, I mean, I'll just talk about it. I think the way I normally do, um, with my words and analysis. But yeah, so I remember at the time thinking it was weird to have like a big match with a non-roster member like Marufuji start the pay-per-view, but I actually now think it's really cool that they did that. It's like, because like one of the things that makes ROH at the time different from WWE and TNA was that it not only featured international stars, but it treated them like big deals. You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
in the 2000s, mainstream wrestling did not do that. You'd have to go back to, WCW, who, at certain points would do that, but and so I think I accepted it more than maybe people who started watching in a different era. But like, like Kenta being in a main event, obviously Morishima being the world champion, Marufuji being treated like a serious major star was something that made it different from WWE and TNA. And I think it made ROH seem cool to have like a lot of featured Japanese stars. I also noticed when this match started, like Prazak And actually, I eventually, when I watched, noticed this about everybody, but the first person I noticed it with was Prazak. Um, he seemed like, even though this was pre-recorded commentary, he definitely seemed more energized than he typically is on an ROH DVD. I don't know. Did you notice that? Like he
Yeah,
was.
I was gonna say,
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I felt no. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I felt like everyone, like, no, the announcers, they were just a little more. They were explaining things a little bit more for the first time viewer than usual. But also, yeah, it felt like, I think I wrote in my notes somewhere that, like, I felt like it was the difference between, like, when you see a friend that comes over like twice a week versus when you see a friend that comes over once a year. Like, there's just a little more, yeah, on edge, energized, on point, formal. Like, yeah, there's just a little bit more. And I think one of the people we might get to, I think someone in the Torch was like, found it grating. Like, that they felt that they were too energetic. I don't think it's that big a difference, but I do think if you've been watching all the shows, it is somewhat noticeable that they're a little bit more there, I
I
guess.
did not. I did not find it grating at all. Are you kidding me? Compared to like most wrestling announcers, these guys were grating. Like, come on. Like,
Yeah.
no, they. I mean, listen. I love Dave Prazak, but sometimes they feel like they're falling asleep on these recorded DVDs.
Well, sometimes with the way we talked about the way they record, sometimes they probably literally were.
Yeah. But like, so it was great to have them excited and like trying to emulate being live in a building, you know? And I actually felt that way about all the wrestlers tonight. Like they just felt like they had an extra pep in their step. And the crowd, I think, helped by being, really hot, and they were, they got a round of applause after trading waist locks, and they definitely emphasized being fast and athletic early. They did lots of rope running, they traded basic strikes and holds and reversals, and obviously Romero did a lot of kicks. He was targeting the arm. Then Marufuji worked over the knee, but really this match was focused on just like athleticism. Marufuji did a cool dragon screw leg whip while Romero's leg was draped over the middle rope. Then Romero went to the top rope and Marufuji kicked his leg and did another dragon screw leg whip off the middle rope, which I thought was really cool. There was, as Marufuji was working on the leg for a while, there was a spot where Romero did like an Asukar and then like limped afterward, which I liked. There was another spot that I really liked. I don't know why I thought it was so funny, but Marufuji yelled "power bomb" before hitting a power bomb, which I don't typically know. And I thought that the one of the coolest parts of the match was when Romero caught Marufuji on the top rope and hit that Diablo armbar off the top, which is always awesome. But the crowd was so into it, and the cross arm breaker, and they were chanting, "Please don't tap." And then they did the whole spot where they were, Romero kicked Marufuji's arm, Marufuji super kicked him, Romero kicked the back of his head, and they both collapsed. And the crowd went nuts for that one. There was just like a lot of like big back and forth athletic moves. There was a really cool near fall when Romero blocked the Shiranui with a tiger suplex and then a kick to the head. And then eventually they both block each other's kicks, and Marufuji lands a combination of kicks and hits the Shiranui to get the win. So like what I would say is it's not the best way to introduce the audience to the stars of ROH, but I thought it was a very good way to introduce them to what they described at the beginning as the style of wrestling that Ring of Honor was built on, which now I actually like better than I did at the time. Like just the idea like, oh, like you're here to watch this. Here's what we do. We do this kind of wrestling. Like it was just like a hard hitting athletic match with big moves, a hot crowd. They did limb work, which ultimately didn't lead to much, but it did allow them to do some cool holds and spots, which I think for an opener is pretty good. So not the most psychologically ingenious match, but I think it was good action and a hot crowd. And I actually do think this was a nice way to, if you were going to introduce people to ROH, I don't think this was a bad way to do it.
This is another match where, if I think about this being the first full match a new viewer sees, which granted might not have been a ton of them, it seems like kind of a weird choice for some of the reasons you mentioned earlier. Like, there's no storyline going into it. Rocky is cool, but in Ring of Honor at this point, he's also a mid-carder who might be the third most important person in his three-person stable. Marufuji's not, like you said, Marufuji's not a regular. But then I think about it and go, if there was some kind of prior storyline to build this matchup, a new fan wouldn't know or care about it. And I had the same thought like you did about Marufuji, but then I looked up just to confirm, and while Marufuji is not on every show, this weekend is the start of 12 different matches he works for ROH for the rest of the year. So basically from this point on, he's a semi-regular for the rest of 2007, and he's on the next two ROH pay-per-views. So he does have a fair bit of presence in ROH from this point on. He hadn't up to this point. And this is also an interesting a year for Romero, because 2007 is the 1 year in his career after he links up with New Japan where he doesn't work New Japan. Like, this year is the 1 year he works for Noah. He does a whole bunch of stuff with Noah, but from 2002 through this year, 2025, every other year Rocky Romero has wrestled in New Japan, which is kind of amazing. Like, that's one hell of a streak. So as for the match itself, I thought it was good. Maybe 3.5 stars. The crowd continues to be hot. Comparing it to Marufuji's match with Matt Sydal the night before, I think Marufuji worked a little harder here, but the Sydal match maybe had a little bit more flash. But I felt like
I don't think the Sydal match had more flash. I watched these two matches back to back. I think this match had a lot more flash.
Maybe more flying. I'm not. Well, I think the real difference to me is the Sydal match felt kind of formless. And this match had that dual limb work to get some structure, with Rocky working on Marufuji's arm, Marufuji working a bunch on Rocky's leg. It's not world-class selling, particularly from Marufuji, but it focuses the match a bit more. And I like some of the legwork, especially like you. I really liked when Rocky jumps to the turnbuckle and Marufuji instantly drop kicks his knee there and Dragon screws him off it. I liked Marufuji running Rocky knee first into the buckle. And we get a fairly exciting final few minutes where Marufuji breaks out the coast-to-coast drop kick, which is always a huge crowd pleaser. So, yeah, not a show stealer or a mind-blowing match to me, but something enjoyable to start things off that doesn't set the bar so high that it can't be topped. And on the star reviews, Dave Meltzer wrote, Romero is a good worker, and Marufuji showed enough that you could see he was special, 3 3/4 stars. Wade Keller wrote, the first 10 minutes was back and forth world-class athleticism, but methodically paced without any great sense of urgency. There were no real personalities that shined through in the match, as both wrestlers were intense, but otherwise expressionless, 3.5 stars. So,
I think, here's how I would describe this match. A match that if it took place after the year 2015 would have gotten 4.5 stars from Dave Meltzer.
You know what? I was thinking when we'll go through this, I was thinking like, man, Dave inflation really is a thing. Not that I didn't know it before, because I think when we go through the star, Dave only watched the main card pay-per-view, but I think on pretty much every star rating he gives for this pay-per-view, I'm either in agreement or a 1/4 star off him. And that is not the case in 2025. So it is crazy. There was a time where it was like, Dave and I had different likes and dislikes, but there was a time where like 80% of the time it's like, oh, Dave's going to be like, me and Dave are going to share similar tastes about a lot of stuff. And I feel like we still might like a lot of the same things, but boy, do we rate them differently now. So after the match, Prazak says, we've just witnessed the style of wrestling ROH was built on, and we get a rare for ROH instant replay, and not just any instant replay, but an instant replay from a previously unused second camera angle of the coast-to-coast dropkick and the crowd chants for Marufuji. So I was going to ask you, Matt, did you notice rewatching this? Because I think this is something else Shane Hagedorn brought up on an honorable mention, which is this was a show where ROH did the unthinkable, Matt. They actually used all their cameras. Like, they actually did an edit of the show where normally they have 2 handheld cameras, but one's just a backup, and I guess for ease of editing, they only ever use the hard cam and the one handheld. They apparently used all their cameras, and they have that one camera that's like up in the stands that they use a few times for the show that gives like, I guess the one that Sean Radican is referring to as the peephole camera.
Yeah, well, they have that like corner camera for they use, especially in the main event. They use that one a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I did notice that, and also obviously just like even like showing replays is a major thing for ROH. So yeah, they did a little more than they normally do to make this a higher class production for sure.
Yeah, Gabe was not telling lies in the way interview when it comes to the idea of. I think he was pretty truthful about like, we're going to do a little bit new, but it's not he his undersell actually was the appropriate sell for that. They do a little bit new, but not reinventing the wheel. We then join Tank Tolan and Larry Sweeney backstage. Larry introduces the two of them and says, we're going to be seeing a lot more of Larry now that ROH is on pay-per-view in millions of homes with more fame and money on the line than ever before. Larry says that he's the best agent in professional sports today, and he already has the top athlete in Ring of Honor as his top client. We then get a quick video clip of Chris Hero, who was not working this show. But Larry then says he's going to drop a bomb. He's going to announce the newest member of Sweet and Sour Incorporated. Tank is excited for this, as Larry says this new athlete makes bones snap and wrestlers cry for mercy. When Larry then introduces this wrestler as Sarah Del Rey, Tank looks a little nonplussed, not disappointed. Larry says now he doesn't just have the best male athlete in Ring of Honor, he has the best female one too. Larry says when you're with him, it's no pay, no play. So he's not afraid to have talent like Sarah sit out until the money is right. Larry adds that Sarah now has the services of Tank, who's the best personal trainer in the business today. Tank pulls Bobby Dempsey into frame from just off camera, pulling up Bobby's shirt to reveal his stomach as he says he's going to turn Bobby into a Greek god, into him. He tells Bobby to start squatting, which he does. Sarah joins in, but Tank calls her sweetie and sugar pie and says squats are an exercise for men. Sarah bets she can do more than him. Tank then challenges her to a squat off, and they proceed to go face to face, doing a squat off, while Bobby collapses in the background from doing just a few. From off camera, Gabe says, "There's something going on. Cut to the ring," which is an old Gabe trope. I like this stuff. I know that people at the time overanalyzed, like, is this the kind of impression you should be giving right off the bat? This was the debut of Sarah Del Rey joining Sweet and Sour Incorporated. But as we'll get to, I think when we watch the DVD portion of this DVD, they don't really acknowledge it on this show afterwards.
Yeah,
it's weird.
They don't acknowledge it live. So I don't know if this in continuity terms was supposed to have taken place after her match.
Yeah.
And not before it. But yeah, I mean, the characters are all entertaining. I don't know if this was worth using precious pay-per-view time for, as opposed to just like as a DVD extra. But obviously we get to see a lot more of all these people during the DVD extras. But yeah, I can't say that Tank Tolan has not been entertaining.
No, he has, absolutely.
I've been enjoying him more than I've been enjoying Brent Albright. And I would not have expected that even based on my memory.
That echoes my thoughts completely. Dave wrote during his review of the pay-per-view, he wrote about this segment. Sweeney has a good rap. First of all, I just love that. Like, did Dave time travel from a past era for the? Sweeney has a good rap, but then Dave continues. He also looks young, but can pull off the punk sports agent role pretty well. In actuality, he is the living embodiment of one well-known MMA agent, and I don't think even he or Sapolsky know it. If there is a real human being that is like the Larry Sweeney character, that is something. But
I wonder if he's still in MMA. We got to ask Dave.
We see Nigel McGuinness attacking Morishima in the ring before Bryan Danielson runs in and attacks Nigel, stomping him with Morishima. Commentary says Nigel called out both of them. We didn't get to see that. They cut that from the pay-per-view. Kenta runs in to make the save as Prazak describes him as Danielson's toughest opponent last year and Morishima's top rival from Japan. Kenta and Nigel team up to take out Morishima, and then we cut away. Here's
what I'm trying to remember. If they really did this in multiple segments like this, or if they just did it all at once and they just like cut it up on the DVD, and because like obviously they announced before the live crowd that this match was happening, and on the actual show the announcers say it, and it kind of annoyed me that they were like just belaboring the announcement. Like they could have just done one segment and like had them announce it if they were going to do this whole like we're going to announce it after the show starts thing. It just felt like contrived in a bad way, like in a WWE bad way, that they were like spreading it out so much and not just announcing the match.
I do believe it might have been two segments, and this is a show where, like, you talked before about, like, was your best use of time on the pay-per-view. I think it's worth pointing out that they edited out some of the entrances, but not all. But just the way they cut this show, it is very dense. Like, you can feel them trying to squeeze in every single second they can into this pay-per-view. And to your point, that almost makes you more judgmental of what they do include. Like, did you really need a second segment to set up that main event?
Right.
When we'll get to, like, they've even cut some minutes out of a couple of these matches. And so yeah, we got the ad for ROHWrestling.com, bunch of highlights there. And then we get the ROH World Tag Team title match. The Briscoes, Jay and Mark, successfully defend the titles when they defeat Claudio Castagnoli and Matt Sydal in 20 minutes, 7 seconds when Jay pinned Sydal after a springboard doomsday device. Matt, because I talked so much, I'm going to let you go first again on back-to-back matches. But first, there's a couple notes about this. One that I think is really interesting. Well, hopefully they're all interesting. But this is from Lenny Leonard. He was a guest on Dave Bixenspan, former guest of the show's podcast Between the Sheets, along with Chris Zellner. On episode 278, he was talking about one of their later pay-per-views. He helped review the pay-per-view with them. Crazy how they get that stuff, goddamn. No, but not that. You know what? I'd be too scared to ask. But anyway, and it would be weird to have a guy that did the show rewatch the show. But anyway. I direct quoted Lenny on this just because I thought it was really interesting and I wanted to get his wording exactly. But he's referring to, I guess, something about Dave wrote a quote about the next pay-per-view about how ROH pays attention to the business and doesn't overspend. And so this is what Lenny said on that episode of Between the Sheets about that. He said, quote, "It's funny, the paying attention to business and not overspending part. The one thing ROH did spend on, and it was probably the biggest expenditure in the company outside of anybody's payroll who was making decent money at that time, was the music for the Briscoes. To get that song, Give Me Back My Bullets, from Leonard Skinner, I want to say, and if my memory serves me, it was at least 50 grand to get that music. They tried to get Final Countdown for Brian, and I want to say Europe wanted something absurd, like $250,000. And they were like, no, get lost. And it would have been like almost every time they used it. For every pay-per-view, it was going to cost a ridiculous amount of money. Whereas I think they were able to cut a deal with Skinner for that song for like 50 grand for the whole year, which is why they played it like it was New Jack coming out to the ring and never turned it off. We were getting our 50 grand worth out of that song. So this is actually like way before it all came to more public light with, Tony Khan trying to get Final Countdown, where like I learned like how the legend of Europe wanting like an insane amount of money for Final Countdown. But I want to talk about this. So you do hear Leonard Skinner Give Me Back My Bullets for the song, for this pay-per-view, and I think they use it as the official theme a couple pay-per-views down the line. I want to say this, like, for all the stuff ROH is talking about how we're not adding, we're not doing anything crazy. This isn't really adding cost to the promotion. Look, I love Give Me Back My Bullets as a theme for the Briscoes. That is we've talked about before. That was Gabe's idea for the Briscoes. That wasn't the Briscoes. That was Gabe. That was one of Gabe's great like aesthetic ideas ever. It's an amazing theme song for them. I miss watching this pay-per-view. I miss everyone having their classic themes. I think that you do lose a little bit with that. I will say this. For a company that was not ever doing great financially, is it worth paying $50,000 so you can play Leonard Skinner for 6 pay-per-views in 1 year? Like, that seems insane to me.
Yeah, especially if the whole point is that like it doesn't put you out at all and you're trying to make more money. Yeah, but you know what? I also don't care. Like, I don't care what they're about you know what I mean? Like, whatever they want to do with their business, as long as the show is good, that's really all I care about. So, obviously, their priorities would be different from mine, but that's why I don't run a business.
So they didn't get Oasis, they didn't get Europe, but they did get Skinnered. And finally, Matt, before I throw it to you, I thought this was an interesting point from Sean Radican. Sometimes you say peephole stuff. Sometimes in life you say some good stuff that I agree with. We all have our peephole moments, and Sean redeems himself here because I thought this was a good point. He wrote, I didn't like how some matches had full ring entrances and others didn't, especially during the Briscoes versus Sydal and Castagnoli match, which began with Sydal and Castagnoli already in the ring. Longtime viewers know that Sydal and Castagnoli aren't jobbers, but first-time fans might have initially been given the impression that they were jobbers due to their lack of ring introduction. I think ROH should do as much as they can to make the show feel like it is occurring live. And I do think that's a good point in the sense of ROH is cutting out some entrances, obviously, they're trying to find different ways to avoid playing the songs they don't have the rights to on pay-per-view. But I do agree that if you're like as a normal wrestling fan, if you don't watch Ring of Honor, you're kind of taught the way wrestling works that if a act doesn't have their entrance shown, that usually means they're a jobber. And it's kind of weird that you kind of unintentionally do that. And granted, you watch this match, I don't think you're going to leave thinking they're jobbers, but I do feel like it is one of these like weird hiccups that comes from trying to like kind of do a little bit of, witchcraft around like, oh, let's hide the fact that we can't play all their themes.
Yes. Okay. But, people talk a lot about how wrestling promotions that are different from what's current, what's been on TV for years should do things that are just different. And hey, you know what? Maybe it's okay to train a different audience that being in the ring already and not focusing on your entrance doesn't make you a jobber. You know what I mean? Like, I know that would
Yeah.
take a lot of retraining, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Like as a wrestling promotion where it's like our entrances are not the most important thing. I've
Hmm.
complimented on ROH before about like when they have tag team matches with people that are not normally teams. They come out together instead of each getting their own entrance because it says to the fans like, hey, this is ROH. It's okay if you don't get to see an entrance because that's not what you're here for. And I kind of like it in this way too, where it's just like, you know what? Yes, we're doing it for time reasons, but also it's okay to tell the audience that you don't need to see the entrance. That's not what's important. That's not what is going to make you impressed with
Hmm.
this wrestler. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not the biggest thing in the world. I think it's just interesting to consider how fans are kind of trained, but you're right. Like could be other ways to do things. Granted, I don't think ROH was doing this saying we're going to train fans to think of a new way to take this seriously. If
Yeah.
all wrestlers don't get entrances, I think they were doing it because they didn't
Yeah.
have the rights to Matt Sydal and Claudio's music. But
Right, right. But you also know that any other wrestling promotion, like in this era, or probably even now, would be like, whatever you do, don't sacrifice the entrances of the stars. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. Well,
So,
WWE sometimes feels like the entrances are more important than the matches
well,
sometimes.
that's my point. Like that was true then too. Um, so I kind of, I don't know. I get what you're saying. It's that wasn't why they did it, but I still like it as a side effect.
Well, you like that. Did you like the match, man? What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought this was I thought like if the first match was a good example of like the style of ROH, this was an even better example. This was just like again, not the most psychologically interesting match you've ever seen, but just a great all action match to the point where I would say this is one of my favorite recent Briscoes matches because as you mentioned when we watched the Motor City Machine Guns match, their matches, even though they were always really good, could get kind of tedious because of all the back and forth and sometimes maybe a little bit overstaying the welcome, and it just kind of like stays at the same level the whole time. But I don't think this match ever got arduous. I think that the pace was just really good, and the Briscoes were awesome as they always are. Seidel, I'm trying to figure out what's going on with him at this point because I know he's going to do his official heel turn soon. But in the past two appearances, he's completely dropped just about every single thing he'd been doing to be heelish.
Hmm.
And I don't understand why. The only thing close to heelish that he did here was like at one point early, instead of doing a clean break against the ropes on Jay, he chops his chest. But that's like he didn't do anything else even slightly heelish. He was basically just like early 2006 babyface Matt Sydal. But one thing that stood out to me is Claudio is finally becoming my favorite version of him, or like one of my favorite versions of him. Like as much as we complained about Claudio's performances for a long time in 2006, now that he's turned babyface again, he's just allowing himself to just be impressive and athletic and fast paced, and I love it. The Briscoes were awesome. They did a big Beal on Seidel. They even did a really big Beal on Claudio, which I thought was really, really impressive. Another thing I liked about this match was that they actually had a couple of actual heat segments here with hot tags instead of like just tag, 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 tag. Um, there was a spot with where Seidel was being beaten up by the Briscoes for a while. And then there was a spot very early on during that heat segment where Mark hit a split-legged twisting leg drop thing while Seidel was over Jay's knee, which got a holy shit chant, which was awesome. And then at that point, Seidel came back after a corner charge. He backdropped Mark all the way to the floor with a really great bump. And then he put Jay on top rope and hit the leaping Rana, and that allowed him to get the hot tag. And then Claudio during his hot tag segment, I think this was the debut of his like middle rope walk, hey 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 elbow drop. Has he done that yet in ROH in our viewing? I forget.
I vaguely recall that he might have done it once or twice before, but I will just say immediately, anytime Claudio does what I would consider the Grand Nanawa second rope crab walk, I would call it, he added his own little spin to it, is instantly a good match in my books. Instantly.
Yeah. Yes. And this is the spot where they build Claudio, which really made me say, wow. There's another really cool spot where Claudio hit a springboard European uppercut across the ring, followed by a really big kick by Seidel. Claudio was doing a bunch of really cool uppercut variations, including a rolling uppercut into the corner, which I liked. Claudio also did a much faster pace than usual giant swing on Jay, which also got an ROH chant. And at that point, Seidel and Claudio did what I would describe as the second heat segment, where they beat up Jay for a while. Not a lot of double teams from Seidel and Claudio in this point, but they do a lot of quick tags. And so in that way, they seemed like a fairly seamless tag team. There was a spot where Briscoes hit a springboard leaping sunset flip off the top rope, and then a buckle bomb, and then they superplex Seidel. And at that point, I noted just what a great pace this match had. It never stopped, but it also didn't feel like it was just a single gear that had no ebbs and flows either. So I think that was something that I enjoyed. Near the end, we get a bunch of cool spots. Claudio hit a springboard European uppercut that sent Jay to the floor. Claudio hoisted Seidel onto his shoulders, and Seidel jumped off of Claudio's shoulders to the outside onto both Briscoes. And then hit a Ricola bomb on Jay Briscoe. There was a spot where Seidel saved Claudio from the cutthroat driver. There was a spot where Jay hit the Death Valley driver on Seidel while Mark simultaneously dove onto Claudio. There was a spot where Seidel blocked the Jay Driller and reversed it into a snap Hurricane Rana for a really great near fall. At that point, Seidel screamed and missed a kick, and then he got hit by the springboard Doomsday Device for the pin. I love this match. I thought it was just so much fun, very exciting. Like I said, no deep psychology. And I guess you could argue that the fact that nobody really believed that Seidel and Claudio could win took it down. But the crowd was so game that they basically acted like they believed that they could. It wasn't like the crowd wasn't buying anything. They were just really into everything. And I don't know. I actually, the Briscoes were awesome here. I think Claudio was the standout to me just because I feel like he hasn't done a ton of performances like this. I think that one of the times he did was in that match in the same building with the Kings of Wrestling against the Briscoes. But I think this was probably his next best performance since then. I thought that he really did a great job and stood out and kept up with everybody. And this is, the Claudio Castagnoli that we all know and love. And the Briscoes were awesome. I think Seidel was probably the least memorable person in the match, but he was still really good. I could see criticisms of this match, but in terms of here's what we want, here's how we want to present what Ring of Honor is to the world, I think this is a great way to do it.
Matt, that was a great review, and by great, I mean I agree strongly with all of it, which of course is this the criteria which all reviews must be judged? How much do I agree with it? But no, first I'll just say this match is the payoff to Claudio beating Jay in a singles match a few shows ago, and remember where the Briscoes then offered him a tag shot, pick a partner, you can have a tag title shot, and Claudio picking Seidel actually makes a lot of sense since Seidel is a former tag team champion, and commentary actually does a good job of actually telling you not only is Seidel a former tag team champion, Seidel won the tag titles by pinning Claudio. So it's one of those kind of, I would say, classic Gabe era ROH booking where on the surface it doesn't look like there's a lot of story to this match, but if you really examine it, there's 2 or 3 little reasons why everything is happening.
Isn't it that Seidel never got a rematch for the titles because when they were supposed to wrestle the Briscoes with him and Daniels, Mark was injured, and it became Jay and Delirious, so Seidel actually was owed a title match anyway.
Yeah, that WrestleMania weekend show, that's a great point too. Yeah, so all that makes sense. And again, I agree completely with everything you said about this review, how we've talked a lot about how The Briscoes, the 2006-2007 iteration, the way their style in this era, sometimes it was usually good, but it could sometimes be good and numbing, and then other times it just hit in a different way, and when it hit in that different way, it was great. This hits, it's great. In fact, I would put this in that top tier of Briscoes tags from 2006 and 2007. I don't know
100%.
where,
Top tier, whatever it is.
yeah,
Top three, top four, whatever, somewhere in there.
yeah, exactly. I don't know where it falls in that group, but it belongs in that group. And I think look at the live reports, doing research for the show. Most people, except we'll get to one weird, funny example way later in the show. Most people agree that this was like the show, the match of the show of the entire taping. And yeah, you mentioned like this is probably maybe slightly controversial, but I don't think really. If you watch the matches, I think this is significantly better than the much remembered and lauded Motor City Machine Guns tag they just had with the Briscoes. I think this is better. Not even a debate in my mind. It's this match isn't different from how like the Briscoes have been wrestling in this era. It's just one of those matches where it's a great version of it. Like you said, everyone's on their game here. Everything is on point. It's like you said earlier about a different match. It feels like everyone, this is one of those matches where I noticed what you were saying, how like it feels like everyone's working that extra level harder, that extra 20% or whatever, because it's the pay-per-view. It's just that relentless Briscoes pace where you're getting so much action and so much stuff that it could have ended like 4 minutes earlier and you would have been more than happy with what you got. But unlike some of their matches, I don't feel like it missed their peak. Like I also didn't get fatigued. Like I was like, it hit that, to me, the Briscoes matches of this era, that's the sweet spot where it's like, you feel like, oh, I'm getting more than I expected, but not so much more that you're like, oh my God, like I'm getting a little full, guys. But I feel like they hit that perfect middle ground here. And, yeah, I prefer this to the Motor City Machine Guns match because it doesn't have those ups and downs, dips in intensity for no reason that one did. It's shorter. It's more impactful, I think, as a result. And another thing I agree with you on, like you, I thought everyone looked good to great here, but I felt like Claudio was the star of this match. I might go a little further than you. I actually might say this might be my favorite Claudio performance up to this point in ROH. I think he looked fantastic here. I thought this was just such a great showcase for so many of the things he can do. Like he shows off that amazing athleticism he has for a guy of his height, whether it's him flying halfway across the ring on those flying European uppercuts, him taking the Briscoes Beal. But yet he still has like this enough physical presence to make his European uppercuts feel like they're hard hits, but he's also taking big time bumps like that monkey flip over the top rope to the floor. And then again, he does the Grand Nanawa crab walk. Instantly great match. And so like looking at this match through a first time ROH viewer's eyes, to me, this is the exact kind of first impression you want to give about what ROH is. It's like, it's a kind of action, it's an amount of action, it's a pace of action that WWE just was not delivering at this time, and that I guess you could say TNA sometimes was delivering with the X division, but in the tag division, not as often because the Motor City Machine Gun at this point were just starting up. And to me, if you're trying to sell new fans on what ROH can offer that the big two can't, well, like they don't have the Briscoes, they don't have tag wrestling like this. It's a match where you feel from minute one that A-game effort. And like most Briscoes matches of the day, it's a match built around that high effort. Like it's built around not just doing cool stuff, but doing a ton of cool stuff and just never letting up on it, where the effect kind of stacks. It's like, to me, watching this match was like when you eat a nice meal that someone's mom made for you, and you can just feel the effort and the love and the attention that they put into it, where you are constantly aware watching this match of how hard these guys are trying in a good way. And to me, that's one of the main magic things about this era of ROH was when it was at its best, it wasn't just great talent. It was great talent who were going to give you their A+, pull out all the stops effort in front of a few hundred to like 1,000+ people. And I just thought this was exactly what I won't say this for everything on the show. This was exactly what I would want on an ROH pay-per-view for first-time people.
And I would go as far as to say this is a match, one of those matches, which happens sometimes in this era, but not all the time, whereas if two teams did this exact match today, 18 years later, it would be considered a fantastic must-see match without changing anything.
which is especially impressive because it's not like a story match, right? Like I always say, how the thing that evolves the quickest in wrestling gets outdated the quickest is matches built around like pace and cool moves. And yet this match is like over a decade and a half old. And I agree, like it's not outdated at all. And yet it's built around the stuff that ages the quickest.
Yeah. Well, it just shows
Yeah.
like these guys were doing modern wrestling back then.
Yeah. And we then go to the Observer. We get a couple things from it. First, I got a quote from him before he saw the match, but from him just recapping what he's been getting from live reports. This one is Dave saying, virtually everyone called this the best match on the show. It was the Briscoe style, which is just one hot athletic move after another. It is the antithesis of WWE style, so some people won't like it. It's not exactly my cup of tea as a style, but in limited doses as a unique match on the card with a move-oriented crowd, it can be excellent. The only negative I heard was it peaked 3 minutes before the finish, but the crowd was still hot at the end, but said to be one of the better matches so far this year. Okay, first, Matt, how hilarious is it that Dave is saying this isn't his kind of match? Because this is now Dave's, this is Dave's match. And also, I don't agree that it peaked 3 minutes before or 4 minutes before.
That didn't occur to me. I don't know when they would have said the peak was if it wasn't when it ended. Yeah, I can't think of like a moment 3 minutes earlier where it's like, oh yeah, that was the peak. That happens. Like I said, that happens not infrequently in Ring of Honor tag matches, but I don't think it happened in this one.
Yeah, and like I said in my review of the match, I thought like 3 or 4 minutes before the end of the match, you could end the match here and I'd be happy, but I don't feel like they missed the peak. But now we go, Dave's a little more positive when we get to the review itself, because Dave then watches the pay-per-view. Here's his review of the match here. The Briscoes have real presence with their music and the crowd reacting to them like they are the best tag team in the world. They have to overcome the stigma to the modern fan that the tag team guys are prelim guys who can't make it as singles when the Briscoes are positioned as main eventers. Casanoli has changed his ring attire, and it wasn't for the better, as even though I thought his old outfit with the sleeveless shirt and tie was goofy is okay if you stand out. Casanoli has improved greatly over the last year. This was 20 minutes and 2 seconds of incredible moves. They probably could do half as much, pace it better, and result in less physical wear and tear, but the crowd is going nuts, and it does make the product stand out, as you could never see a match like this in WWE, and they have to be better than WWE in some way to have a cult audience. I wouldn't call it a match of the year, but there hasn't been a pay-per-view match this year from any promotion quite like it. But I do think this style puts guys at too much risk, and in time, these guys will learn to have just as good a match by doing half as much and less high risk. 4.25 stars.
It's funny that many years later, I think Dave would be much more positive on this match than he was. I actually do think this was a low-level match of the year level match for what we've seen so far this year, and for my recollection of 2007. Also, like, I don't think it would be crazy at this point for someone to say this was like one of the best 2 or 3 Ring of Honor matches in 2007. I don't think that'd be crazy at all.
I might put it maybe just a notch. Like, you know what? My review, I would agree with the star rating. I would give this 4.25 stars, and I'm a pretty hard marker, so that's pretty high for me. I do think it's funny that Dave is like there is something we notice this occasionally with both Wade and Dave, and it's not necessarily a huge fault because they were covering so much wrestling, especially Dave, that like they couldn't watch every show of smaller promotions like ROH. But there are sometimes things where they are out of touch that a regular viewer of that promotion would know, because Dave being like, oh, Claudio's really improved in the last year. Because remember we talked about like the year before he really shit on Claudio, but what he didn't get was that was Claudio as a heel in ROH. And for some reason, we've gone into it, Claudio as a heel singles in ROH was not good. He was good in other promotions. He was good as a heel in tags. He was good as a singles. And Dave just started catching him when he was in this weird era of not being good. And so, but it's like Claudio's really improved. I would say this is his best performance, or one of his best in ROH up to this point, but it's not like, oh man, Claudio's really learned how to wrestle. I wouldn't say it like that.
No, he's just allowed himself to become unleashed style-wise.
Yeah.
And become the Claudio that he gets to already be in, like, Chikara, you know?
Yeah. He's playing back to his strengths. I also think it's funny, Dave talks so much about the wear and tear and stuff. And look, it is wear and tear, I'm sure. Seidel certainly has some wear and tear on his ankle, although some of that's not due to wrestling. But like, Claudio's still going at a high level. Mark is still going at a high level. You know, these guys, you know, some of these guys, you know, the old proverbial, so many times people would watch these matches and go, they'll be in wheelchairs when they're 35 or whatever. Well, they're in their 40s and they're still pretty close to this level, you know.
Yeah, I mean
So
Claudio, I mean when he's unleashed, he's still one of the best. Mark is still one of
y-
the best, you know?
yeah. And Wade's review of this match, he just wrote, really good tag match with a big dose of state-of-the-art athleticism, 4 stars. Um, After the match, the fans chant ROH, and we get a couple instant replays of key moves, and we then get a cool camera angle of Lenny Leonard and Dave Prazak in the crowd looking into the ring. This is, I believe, the first time we have ever seen, well, maybe, I think we've seen Dave, we've definitely, obviously, for a bunch of times seen Dave Prazak before when they worked in the Midwest.
Prazak's been a ring announcer, he's been a backstage interviewer. We've never seen Lenny Leonard on camera
Yeah.
before.
We see them even though they did not produce, they did not do live commentary, they still did the post production. I believe Kenny Leonard, Kenny Kenward, Lenny, I believe, has said on podcasts and interviews in the past that ROH flew them out here for the first pay-per-view because they wanted fans to be able to put faces to the names. I don't know why it became important for them when they were on pay-per-view and not at any other time in their history, but I guess maybe they think casual fans need to know what their announcers look like, so here they go. But Prazak has a mic, and he thanks everyone watching at home for letting them earn your respect, and then he thanks everyone in Manhattan for another sellout crowd. Dave says ROH has sold out every event they've run in Manhattan. Lenny says, as great as it is to watch ROH at home in the comfort of your own living room, there's nothing that beats the experience of watching it live in the building, so plug in those live tickets. Prazak then plugs some upcoming show locations and says some may even be taped for future pay-per-views. And at this point, Kevin Steen and El Generico barge in, and Steen asks when he and El Generico are getting their well-deserved tag team title shot. They then run to the ring and brawl with the Briscoes as the entire crowd olays. The brawl is quickly broken up by a million refs and students, at which time the crowd boos and chants, "Let them fight." Mark jumps from the top onto a few people, and the brawl continues a bit, even with everyone holding them back. And angry Steen and Generico take out who I thought were a couple students, but then listening to an honorable mention and then going back and looking at, they were actually an uncredited deranged and
Azrael, right? I noticed
Azrael,
I noticed Azrael when he was throwing him into the turnbuckle.
Yeah, and
I always hate that when ROH puts people that we've all seen before many times and they just pretend that they don't know who they are.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I remember you always complaining about that. And I agree, when Monster Mac would show up as like part of Homicide's posse, like years after he was a regular tag team guy in ROH. It's the same thing here. We're like, they don't call them by name. They don't do anything, which maybe they just don't want to distract from adding more names to guys that aren't going to be around.
I don't buy it. That's such Vince McMahon brain to me. Oh, yeah. So it would be such a huge distraction if they said, "Oh, he's throwing Azrael into the turnbuckle." Oh no, how are we going to focus on the Briscoes?
So Steen and Generico hit signature moves like the Ole kick, and Kevin Steen hits an insane Steenalizer where Azrael takes the bump and he bounces through the ropes to the floor, like from the momentum of it's like a crazy, dangerous looking bump. They then hit someone else with the package pile driver brainbuster combo. Generico then dives off the top turnbuckle into a pile of people, including the Briscoes in the aisleway. The brawl then starts up again, with it being shot by a camera at the curtain. We follow them backstage where the brawl continues, and we get a messy jump cut to Steen taking out Mark in the hallway with a chair shot. Steen laughs at what he's done to Mark, screams to kiss the tag titles goodbye as he and Generico are held back and dragged away again as Jay checks on an unconscious Mark. I thought this was pretty incredible as a segment because it just kept going. I think it was 5 straight minutes from the time Steen and Generico showed up to the end of the segment, and I felt like that was long enough to really make an impact, because I think if this was just your classic 30-second run-in where you hit a couple moves and pose, it wouldn't have grabbed the attention that this did, where it felt like there was like 3 or 4 times during the segment where you thought it was at like a natural endpoint, and then it just starts up again. And I actually thought that really worked for this segment.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic segment. And, this is the ROH feud of the year. And this is, one of the real big moments where it heats up and, becomes a big deal. And Steen came off like such a star here, as he always does. And, what you really want when you get a big segment like this is for the crowd to be going crazy over all of it. And they did. They obliged, so it seemed really hot, too. So, yeah, this couldn't have been better, I don't think.
And even Dave liked this, because in his review he wrote, pull-apart brawls are a dime a dozen these days, particularly on TNA. As always, TNA gets the shift. Well, this was a no dime a dozen pull-apart. It was a great brawl, including Steen and Generico laying out the security guys with unique moves like a package pile driver and package power bomb by Steen. Both Steen and Generico's weakness is how they look. Steen looks like a guy in the stands as opposed to at least a well-conditioned athlete. I'm not saying people should take steroids or need great bodies, but to me, if you work so hard to be that good at one aspect of the game, which is doing all the moves and showing the intensity to make it that believable, why skip out on the relatively easy aspect of learning about training and dieting? If you want a career in wrestling and don't at least look athletic, well, you'd better be able to talk like Mick Foley. It's hard to make a run-in to set up a match on the next show not look like something you've seen a million times, but they did.
So here's the funny thing, Dave. You probably don't know this. Steen is one of the best talkers of his generation. So suck it.
Here's the thing I will say. I actually did kind of feel like I had never had a problem with Steen's look, but I did have the kind of the mindset of like, man, why? I felt this way sometimes about some eras of Chris Hero too, which he did for a while, which is like, if you just lost a little bit of weight, WWE would be all over you right now. And I was like, are they ever going to let a guy like Kevin Steen with like the big stomach and wearing the t-shirt and basketball shorts do that? And, sometimes you have to be reminded that I'm sure all those things worked against him and were barriers he had to climb. But I guess sometimes we do forget, or some of us do, that if you're really, really talented, not always, but sometimes in wrestling, you do overcome those biases. Because not only did Steen make it incredibly well in WWE, he did not lose the weight. He did not take off the t-shirt. Like, he didn't take off the basketball shorts. Like, he got to be authentically him. And so, Dave was proven wrong, to a degree, maybe a lesser degree than Dave, but also like people like me were proven wrong. Like, this was with Steen, it was not a rare opinion,
But also it's like let Steen be Steen, and like maybe if he wanted to do what he thought he needed to do to get to WWE, maybe he would have, and maybe that wasn't his only goal. Like there's also the idea of like assessing the talent for who they are instead of just your arbitrary idea of they need to be focused on being a star in WWE. You know what I mean? Like, yes, You're right that he was able to just be a star in WWE anyway. But that's not the only way to assess somebody. Like, I think that's what bugged me the most about it. Like, just talk about how good he is instead of talking about, and Dave's been doing that for years in all of the ROH reviews that we've been going over. Since the beginning of ROH, he's been doing that stuff about why someone wouldn't make it in WWE. And it's like, just fucking talk about it for what it is. Why do we have to look at everything through the lens of that? It's very annoying. The other thing that bugged me about what he said was like, oh, you better be Mick Foley level of promo. And it's like, well, maybe if you gave him a chance, you'd realize like he was I don't know, Mick Foley level, whatever. I mean, he's one of the best promos, right?
Yeah.
Kevin Steen is one of the top promos of the era. And I think most people would say he's one of the best promos in WWE today. So it's just like, shut up. Like, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't actually know. You haven't watched any Kevin Steen. Right? Like, what are the odds? How much Kevin Steen do you think that Dave had seen at this point besides what he'd seen from ROH?
Probably not much, because I don't think he was watching like the Canadian stuff, and I don't think he was watching much, if any, of PWG at this point.
And I'm a Dave defender in a lot of ways. Like, I'm not like a Meltzer hater at all. Like, I think like the attacks.
We're not a Meltzer hating podcast.
Yeah, no. I think the attacks on Meltzer are like over the top and insane. But like, this is the kind of stuff where it's like, it's worth calling him out to say like, you should know better. There's other ways to look at this stuff.
Well, it does go again back to what I said about the Claudio thing, which is, if you're just dropping in for the big ROH events and that's your experience with indie wrestling, I understand that you don't have time for that, but there are things you're going to miss. Because, going to your point, I think a lot of people, even in his indie era, would argue that as good as Steen was in the ring and however much, you liked Steen in the ring, his bigger selling point, even on the indies, was his charisma and his ability to talk and his crowd connection. And so, to be Dave, like, he better talk like Mick Foley. Well, actually, like, his likability is kind of similar to Foley's, and I wouldn't say he's as good a promo as peak Mick Foley, but he does have that similar kind of likability when he wants to. And So next we're going to go to a segment that did not make it on the pay-per-view for an obvious reason, and that's Homicide saying farewell to the fans. It didn't make the DVD or the pay-per-view. Dave in the Observer recaps it. He goes, in a segment that won't air on the pay-per-view or DVD, Homicide came out and gave a farewell speech. This led to a loud "fuck TNA" chant. He put over ROH and thanked everyone for his time in the company. He said he expected that ROH would soon become one of the top companies in the world, and thanked Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, and Austin Aries for their part. There were people live who, knowing how Joe lost his planned title win earlier this year over comments made in an ROH show, didn't think Homicide was being smart politically, and how strongly he put ROH over here and how he talked about TNA. The story behind this is Homicide asked to do a farewell in New York since it's home and the city he was most over in. Sapolsky, citing what happened to Joe, told him to get permission from TNA ahead of time. He took off his bandana and laid it in the center of the ring and kissed it and left. Julius Smokes then poured his drink on the bandana and left. Brian Alvarez wrote on Figure 4 Weekly, fans were going nuts and chanting all sorts of things, including "fuck TNA." Homicide was careful not to say anything negative about TNA, but did note that ROH was going to be the #1 company in the world, and added, quote, "That's right, I said it and I don't give a fuck," unquote. That's definitely something Homicide would do. And then finally, we'll go to PW Insider. Actually, PW Insider wrote, Homicide received permission from TNA to come to the pay-per-view taping in order to say farewell to the New York City audience that has supported him not just for the last 5 years in ROH, but in some cases his entire career. That segment won't be released on DVD or pay-per-view. A TNA representative told Mike Johnson that had ROH used Austin Aries in a similar fashion, he could have appeared, but since ROH doesn't want to be handicapped by not using talent they can't utilize on pay-per-view and potential national retail DVD releases, it's their call not to not use the talent. I imagine probably with ROH, this was also them knowing that there was a good chance Aries was going to be back eventually anyway. And then finally, PW Torch says, Gabe Sapolsky feels Homicide's return to ROH at the pay-per-view taping on May 11th was a much-needed occurrence. Quote, it was closure that we all needed from Homicide to the fans to myself, which that's great, Gabe, because none of us at home get to see this great piece of closure. But
I got to see it.
God damn you. Tears running down your eyes as Homicide eloquently told you just all the things that ROH meant to him. But no.
Tears of laughter knowing that you couldn't see it and I could.
You son of a bitch. But next we have
are we the Outrunners?
We gotta hurry up and catch that flight to Texas for tomorrow. We're the pre-show, man.
Yeah, that's right.
Next, we have a video package recapping the Delirious Roderick Strong feud. The problem I would say with this, Matt, is this feud is all based around Delirious suffering a very real and very frightening concussion in the match, and they show that in this highlight package, but he suffers that concussion on what looks like a fairly standard back bump off the turnbuckle. So now, if you were to watch the next few minutes of that match, it is very obvious how real this was and how screwed up he was. But here you just see the bump a couple times and Delirious snoring for a second. And I wonder if a new fan would watch this and be like, oh, this is so fake, when it really is like a legitimate horrifying concussion. But
yeah, I don't know how much there is you could do about that, though.
Yeah, exactly. That brings us to Roderick Strong defeated Delirious via pinfall in 17 minutes, 6 seconds with the Gibson driver. Dave talked about this before seeing it from live reports. He wrote, the match was slow paced and the crowd was negative toward it early. The crowd seemed burned out by the length of the show at this point. Brian Alvarez wrote in Figure 4 Weekly, they were put in the position of following the scramble match, plus it, which we'll get to later because some of the stuff aired out of order, plus it was well over 3 hours into the show, so the fans hated it. I'm told it was a good match, but they worked a slow style building towards the finish, and after about 15 minutes, the fans were chanting, this match sucks, end it now, and take it home. God knows how they're going to edit this one for the pay-per-view. So this is another match where we skip entrances and go straight to them in the ring. This is like the one match on the show that actually is like built up with an existing feud in Ring of Honor. Probably because doing research for the show, I saw some of those live reports ahead of time that said how disappointing this match was. I was surprised that I enjoyed this match as much as I did. Like, let's get this straight. I like this. I did not love it. I'd rate this as a strong good, not even very good, but a strong good. And I don't really see what the live reports saw. Now, to be fair, that might be literal because live reports had this match listed at around 21 and a half minutes, and on pay-per-view it comes out to barely over 17. So if they edited out 4.5 minutes, it's possible they edited out the worst parts of this match. It's also possible that they edited out the crowd turning on it in the way some of these live reports suggest. But watching it, the crowd that has been loud all night, I would say pops quite a bit. There are moments where maybe they're a little more subdued, but only by like the incredibly high standards they've set on this show. I would say the flaw of this match is they're doing a match that is all about being all back and forth action, a high pace from beginning to end, and they're following a match in the Briscoes tag that had the exact same style and selling points, and they can't compete with that. Like, that doesn't mean, though, that this match isn't good in a vacuum. Like, I would say it does outdo the tag match in one aspect, and only one aspect, which is there are a couple insane bumps here. Like, Roddy takes this wild bump off a neck breaker while he's sitting on the top turnbuckle, and Delirious takes this really nasty version of Roddy's back suplex drop on the apron where instead of landing with his whole back on the apron, it looks like he took the edge right on his spine, like his back was half on, half off, and it looks like he took it really hard. I think this is another match where it felt like these guys were working extra hard for the pay-per-view. Like, if this is on another show, especially like a Friday night B show, it's probably shorter and slower. There's not even mat work here unless they cut that out. They just start at a lively pace. They keep that the whole way. One issue I do have is even by the nature of indie matches of the day, though, which do a lot of your move, my move, back and forth pacing, I felt like some of the transitions here were between one guy being in control and the other guy were, I don't know if I want to say rough. I want to say almost like they were non-existent. Not every single one, but there were a few times in this match where someone takes a move and the other guy barely, not even doesn't barely sell, he barely reacts to it because it's like, we're trying to keep up a certain pace. It's my move now. So rather than artfully transition to this, how about I just do something now? And it ends very definitively, which I also like. Like, again, if you're looking for differences between other promotions and ROH on, in making this first impression, here's a match where the face is coming in trying to avenge a wrong, and the heel ends up beating them definitively, completely clean, just by hitting their usual big combo of moves at the end, the half Nelson backbreaker into the sick kick, into the Gibson driver, which I thought was, it's an example of good, non-wimpy ROH booking where sometimes the heel is going to win strong, like no pun intended, and yeah, I don't think there's anything special, but I thought this was a good match. Like, I don't get what the live reports, I don't know if you remember all these years later what it was like live, but
no, I really don't.
Didn't see it on DVD.
Yeah, I really don't. I mean, they might have edited the crowd noise if it was as bad as they're saying it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's possible that they edited out some of those negative chants.
So what did you, yeah.
But I agree with you about the match. I thought the work was good. I think something was missing, like the flow, like you said, like the transitions and stuff. But like it was what made it different is this was a grudge match, and it was worked in that way. It fit the feud, where they were just going at it hard with each other and doing, like you said, some insane bumps. Some hard hits. There was like an unfortunate part in the end where Delirious like kind of glanced at his punt, but he hit the other one, and Strong came back with that half Nelson backbreaker, sick kick, Gibson driver combo. But like, I don't know, just the intensity I thought was there, and that's what it needed to have. The crowd didn't come off badly at all, so the editing job was good. And yeah, I think this was the weakest match on the show. I would say, of the pay-per-view portion of the show. But, like, to me, that speaks to the strength of the show. Like, this was a good match. Like, this would have been one of the better matches on most WWE pay-per-views or TNA pay-per-views of that year. And also, most WWE pay-per-views now, is what I would say. So, I would say this is, I just thought it was good, not memorable. I think these two could have a more dynamic match against each other, especially given the feud. Like, maybe this would have been the time to say, okay, we're going to have a bloodbath here, maybe that would have fit, and maybe that would have made this match more memorable. As it stands, it was just a good, solid match. I do think that post-match, when Prazak talked about how you have to give it up to Delirious for lasting so long against Strong, that was sort of weird because Delirious was someone who was presented as a world title threat in 2006, and here they're sort of like treating him as like, oh, you got to be impressed that he almost like he stood up to this guy even though he's not in his league. I thought that was a strange way to position Delirious, but other than that, I thought it was good.
Yeah, and I do agree, like, one thing this match could have done is be, like, maybe a bit more violent, like, almost gimmicky to add some variety and make it even more of the feel of a blood feud to, like, kind of differentiate this style, add some variety to the show. But the one other thing I forgot to mention, Roddy during this match almost does, like, a black hole slam into a backbreaker, which was just fucking so cool. Like, I thought that was really cool, too. Anyway, Dave Meltzer reviewed this match, and he wrote, this match didn't have the heat of the rest of the show. Perhaps following the tag title match was an issue. I don't know if they edited some bad spots out. I'd heard it wasn't good, but it looked shaky early, but good enough at the end. It wouldn't have been the best match on most WWE or TNA shows, but it would have been one of the better matches. 3.25 stars. That is a Dave-ass written Dave paragraph there. Wade Keller didn't really say anything about this match, but he gave it 3.5. You know, again, these guys, the star ratings are kind of in sync with what I would feel so far. After the match, Davey Richards and Rocky Romero bring a barricade to ringside and then proceed to stomp Delirious as Roddy balances it on the ring apron and the ringside barricade before Gibson drives Delirious onto it. Eric Stevens runs in. He takes out Davey, Rocky, and Roddy 1-on-3.
A bit too late, Eric.
Yeah. And then we cut to Shane Hagedorn and Adam Pearce backstage. Pearce shares an intense stare with Shane and tells him that the eyes are the gateway to a man's soul before asking him to, quote, go find him, unquote. Shane walks away to do just that, and Adam tells us that his name is Scrap Iron Adam Pearce, but we can call him the Scrap Daddy. And he says this in such a serious tone that almost made me laugh. I'm sorry, there's no way you can say you can call me the Scrap Daddy and make that serious.
I don't know.
Says
I think Shakespeare could do it.
He says there's a hell of a lot of soul searching to do in ROH, laying out how ROH has grown in size over the last 5 years, but how now it's taken its biggest step, live in 50 million homes on pay-per-view. Pearce says everyone in ROH has to step up to take their place. Hagedorn returns and informs Adam that the person Adam was looking for is nearby. Pearce walks, as always in ROH, the person you're looking for is always like 5 steps away from you. Pearce walks a few steps and points to BJ Whitmer, who is sulking at the other end of a long hallway. Pearce says BJ's soul is in so much pain he can't reveal it to the world. He's made sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice for ROH and ROH's fans. He's had his flesh torn and bones broken and made more than one trip to the hospital. And recently he lost one of the most violent feuds in history to Jimmy Jacobs, and now his spirit is broken. Now he'll have to look in the mirror and ask himself how he can break free. And if that's all not enough, he's now got to live with being the first person to ever lose a match on ROH pay-per-view. Every night BJ is going to have to ask himself how to get relief, how to make peace. Pearce says that everyone will have to dig deep and find that spot in their soul where clarity lives. They have to know what they're capable of. Pearce says he knows what he's capable of, and soon every single one of us will know it too. We see him walk down the hallway and rest a consoling hand on BJ's shoulder. On an honorable mention on their podcast, Shane Hagedorn, I believe, said that this is the one and only time he can remember Gabe actually scripting a promo out word for somebody for Adam Pearce.
Well, it didn't feel like it was like scripted by a writer, I would say.
Yeah.
It felt like a Pierce-esque thing to do. So I actually liked it, even though I know that what it was beginning was the Hangman 3, which, you know, has a mixed reputation. I thought this was a good promo. I don't know.
I thought maybe it was just a little bit overly dramatic and overly long, but Adam Pearce is one of the best interview promo guys they've got in the company at this point. And so, you know, like you, it's like I kind of did not think this was bad, but then I was like, oh, I remembered, it's building up to Hangman 3. Like, I wish this was in service of something that I end up liking more. But
right.
That brings us to the pay-per-view main event. Bryan Danielson and Takeshi Morishima defeat Kenta and Nigel McGuinness in 24 minutes, 44 seconds when Danielson made Kenta tap out to the cattle mutilation. Live reports had this match as 26:31, so this appears to be another match where they edited out a couple minutes to fit it into the pay-per-view. Dave and the Observer talking about this before seeing it just from live reports wrote, apparently it started out badly with Morishima and McGuinness, but Kenta and Danielson were great together. This is another thing that I do not see in this match. Does that mean that was in something in the 2 minutes they edited out? I don't know. But either way, what'd you think about this match? I'll point out, Nigel entered with Kenta to Kenta's theme, and Bryan entered with Morishima to Morishima's theme. So I thought that was a very clever way of them not having to play Oasis in Europe. They could just be like, well, there wasn't going to be 4 separate entrances anyway. But Matt, what'd you think about this match?
I thought this was another match with like super nonstop action, like another hard-hitting spectacle. I thought this was another example of everybody like really stepping it up. Like even Kenta, you know, who like, why would he care if this was a pay-per-view or not? But I feel like his intensity level was even stepped up from like recent performances that he's done. Like this match was faster paced than I remembered. I think that's like one thing that stands out. It obviously wasn't like Briscoes versus Seidel and Claudio, levels of fast pace, but I do think what this match had that that one didn't was like projection of personalities, especially with Nigel, you know. But you know, like I love like that. But what I love about it is you just get little snippets of these pairings that kind of tease or are appetizers for these great singles matches. You know, Kenta and Danielson start the match and they do early mat wrestling, and of course they look great. When Danielson and McGuinness are against each other early, they stay on the mat, but McGuinness is more aggressive than Kenta. He grinds his forearm into Danielson's face. Um, we this is where we see a lot more of that weird, like unusual, I guess, quote unquote, peephole cam, as you mentioned, from the corner, where we kind of get to feel naughty watching the match. I don't know. um, but
People, I heard from one live report that people in your section were distracted by one guy keep saying, "I've been a bad boy" from watching the show with that vantage point. He just, with like a coyish like finger to his mouth as he's watching from a weird above ground vantage point.
yeah, why did you hire that guy to go sit next to me? I don't understand.
I don't know.
It was annoying, honestly. Always talking about how he's going to be a bad boy. Yeah, no. At this point, like Nigel starts taking a lot of punishment. Like Morishima was standing on McGuinness, and actually Morishima's offense on Nigel was the only part in the match where things slowed down, as we've talked about before. Morishima does like to, when he's on offense, just kind of walk around and pull his pants up. That is a thing that I've noticed with him.
Yeah.
But those like slow stretches were very, very limited here. They're very truncated, I guess I would say, to pun intended, with Morishima's trunks. But it seemed like at certain points Nigel's neck was being targeted. Morishima did a camel clutch and stuff like that, and there was a certain spot where just Danielson is we're going against Kenta, and I think performing even by his standards in a really intense and energetic way, showing off his character by being more aggressive in his strikes than before the injury, which I think matches up well with Kenta. This is something that I will notice more as we go forward, but this is one of my favorite versions of Bryan Danielson, the one that we get after his comeback in 2007, while he's still kind of heelish. Like he's more focused than he was in 2006, less of the like walking around playing with the crowd, which obviously we both liked, but like I like this version where he's just really focused, intense, doing more kicks, doing more strikes. I really like that version of Danielson. Less smarmy, more intense. Also, the announcers really put over Morishima's speed and agility. This is where he busts out a lot of that stuff you wished that he would have done in the opener, with the cartwheel, the missile drop kick, back to back. Kenta really shows some stuff. He does a power slam on Morishima, which the crowd pops really big for. And then McGuinness comes back in, and he's extremely aggressive with Morishima with his strikes. There's a really cool spot, if you are into this sort of thing, that we sort of get as a repeat from the singles match between McGuinness and Morishima, where Morishima hits a missile drop kick on Nigel, but the second one of the match, but Nigel pops up and hits that, quote, fighting spirit lariat. I think that maybe I would have liked that spot better if Nigel sold the drop kick like after he hit the lariat, because he really didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I don't mind it. I think it's cool. I think a lot of this match was about Nigel showing his quote fighting spirit. There's actually a really cool spot where I don't think they did this in the singles match, where Nigel actually counters the Morishima corner cartwheel with a lariat.
That was really cool.
It kind of reminded me of when you punch Bald Bull when he charges at you in Punch Out.
Matt, are you saying that Morishima could be improved if he had like 2 bandages on his stomach in every match?
Yeah, well, in the second round of the match. Also, if when Morishima ran at you, it went boom, 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 boing, like that. There's another cool spot where Morishima blocked the jawbreaker lariat and hit the backdrop driver like immediately. There was also a spot where Kenta helped Nigel hit the Tower of London by grabbing Morishima's leg. There's a late spot in the match where Kenta and Danielson both get tagged in, and they have like a wild strike battle, slaps, headbutts, kicks, which I think they do more of in the second match they have with each other, which they didn't really do as much of in the first. I the ending. I think we get a few more the big moves. Danielson hits the chicken wing on Kenta at one point. There's a spot where he goes for the belly to back superplex, but Nigel on Kenta, but Nigel comes over and power bombs Danielson. Um, Danielson gets hit with that rope straddle lariat at one point. Nigel hits Morishima on the floor with that floor rebound lariat and tosses him over the guardrail so he could do his big guardrail dive that he's been doing in his big matches lately, which gets a big ROH chant. Then we get McGuinness and Danielson going nose to nose, and Danielson blocks a lariat and drops down and kicks Nigel's elbow, and which sends him out to the floor. And then Danielson goes for the diving headbutt on Kenta, but Kenta gets his boots all the way up, hits the kick combo and the Busaiku knee, and then he hits the go to sleep on Danielson, but Morishima breaks up that pin. And we get a few more Morishima's big spots, the Uranagi on Kenta, which Danielson follows with the diving headbutt. And during this time, we see Nigel having his elbow taped up while this is all going on, which I do think adds an extra bit of drama. That feels like something we don't normally see in American wrestling matches. That almost made the match feel like a big Japanese tag match, honestly. Like he's getting worked on.
Did you feel bad for that guy there that was clearly was not prepared and not trained to do a good job wrapping an elbow? It was like, oh shit, I gotta do this for this angle, and it was frantically trying to stick some tape onto his elbow. I was like, that feels like me.
I kind of like that though. It kind of just made everything seem more intense. I don't know, the franticness I kind of liked. There was while this is all going on, Kenta's being double teamed. Morishima's holding Kenta, getting for a roaring elbow from Danielson, and then Danielson holds him for a Morishima clothesline. I liked all that stuff. Then we get Nigel. He's finally being taped up. While Morishima and Kenta almost look like they're going for the doomsday device. Morishima and Danielson almost look like they're going for the doomsday device on Kenta. Nigel comes in, hits a jawbreaker lariat on Morishima. Kenta hits the leaping top rope Falcon Arrow on Danielson. Gets a 2 count. All four guys are down, which gets that big all 4 guys are down ovation. And then we get back up for an even longer finishing sequence. Danielson hits the roaring elbow on Kenta, puts him on top for a belly to back superplex. There's a delayed cover, and Danielson goes right to the cattle mutilation. Kenta rolls out, so Danielson hits the elbow, but Kenta stands up out of it, goes for the go to sleep, but Danielson blocks it, hits a tiger suplex, and Kenta kicks out, and he rolls right back into the cattle mutilation. And Nigel tries to save, but Morishima blocks him, elbows his arm, and Kenta finally taps again to the cattle mutilation. I actually did not remember and was impressed that Kenta's now jobbed twice cleanly to the cattle mutilation. Just shows the respect that Noah had for Danielson. But I think what I was surprised, excuse me, I'm getting a little tongue-tied. What I was most surprised by in this match was how all action it was. Yes, we got a lot of the drama from Nigel, but this was a fast-paced moves match in a way that I did not expect. And I really liked it because these guys are obviously capable of that. And I think when you combine that with the drama of Nigel and, the hard-hitting intensity of Morishima, who, I'll be honest, was maybe not the most standout person in this match, but I still think he did a good job. And the extra little oomph that everyone had, this match was better than I remembered. It wasn't quite as good as the Briscoes match, but I thought this was a great match. I thought this was a really great match, and liked it more now than I did in 2007. I have to watch it again, but I think I liked it more than the Best in the World tag match with Danielson and Joe against Kenta and Marufuji from the year before. I really liked this a lot. I was impressed with what they did. It was just different from what I expected.
I think before I get to my thoughts, I want to ask you something because you brought something that made me think, which is about this being such another go. Now, granted, a lot of ROH matches in this era were kind of go, but do you think it was maybe a conscious effort on this show, apart from maybe the Marufuji match having a little bit of limb work? It felt like maybe this pay-per-view was almost more oriented to don't go to the mat much, hit them hard and fast, and just really up the action and pace to like the higher end of ROH's typical level. Like do that the whole night through. It felt like. Do you think it was a conscious decision? Maybe.
Yes. I think they were like,
Yeah.
go for action. I don't think they told him, don't go to the mat. I think
Yeah.
they probably said, keep the pace fast.
Yeah.
Because they do go to the mat here. They just do it in a fast-paced way.
Yeah.
There's, like I said, the only like time where you get the Triple H slow it down, and when it's too slow, slow it down some more, is the Morishima working on Nigel and walking around and pulling up his trunks. Like that's really the only time you get that. Otherwise, it's just about pace. It's about speed.
Hmm.
It's about action. And listen, if I were in charge of this, I would have said the same thing. I would have said, show the world what we can do. Even though they obviously were not promoting this like we want the world to see this, the wrestlers should work it that way anyway. And honestly, well, I'll get to when I'll say more when I do my final thoughts on the pay-per-view. But yeah, that's what I think of this match.
So, my first thought before I get to the match itself is kind of touching on what we talked about like near the start of the show, which is I've looked at matches on this show, on this pay-per-view, trying to imagine a first-time viewer of ROH would view them. But for this match and this whole pay-per-view at this point, I'm looking at from the view of a long-time ROH viewer, because one thing I think is that we talked about earlier that I think is really interesting about this pay-per-view is that from a long-time ROH viewer perspective, for a card for a major show, for the ROH's first pay-per-view ever, it isn't that sexy. Like, I don't think this is a strong A-show card by modern, like 2007 ROH standards. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a good card of matches with a lot of great talent, but there's not that one super enticing singles match. There's not some big time resolution to a feud. We get a middle chapter in Delirious and Roddy, which is a mid-card feud. We get a random Rocky Romero Marufuji match. We get the Briscoes defending the tag titles against a makeshift team in a match that turns out to be great. And then we get this all-star tag main event that's more about setting up months of feuds than resolving anything. But then I started to think like, okay, think about that again, because ROH had just emptied a lot of their tank in terms of big matches, right? Like, I think a few shows ago, I talked about how I was really impressed that between the fifth year festival and WrestleMania weekend, ROH promoted 8 straight shows already in 2007 as kind of A+ tier, meaningful, exciting event. You gotta buy the shows. And while they varied in quality and significance, I think that with the possible exception of that Dayton show in the fifth year festival, all 8 shows had at least one match or moment or title change that felt really big and meaningful and significant, and some had more than one. But the flip side of that is now, like, not long after, they're having to do a pay-per-view, and they got a lot of their cool stuff is exhausted. A lot of that stuff they've used up. And likewise, ROH just lost Homicide, Daniels, Cabana, Aries temporarily, and that's a lot of name value, at least by ROH standards, to lose. So ROH definitely was going into this pay-per-view at a point where it felt like they had entered the rebuild part of the wrestling promotion cycle after that big 8-show stretch. And even though this is the first pay-per-view, it's interesting that this feels like part of that rebuild stage. Like it feels like a middle chapter that's setting up a bunch of things for the future rather than anything gets paid off on this show. And when I think about that, although at the time I was really initially disappointed when I saw the live results and was like, that's the pay-per-view, it does make sense because first-time ROH viewers aren't going to know or appreciate any matches that are big, feud-ending blowouts when, like I said earlier, when they've never seen a show before. And you could argue that for long-time fans, the excitement over it being the first pay-per-view is kind of a draw in itself. So maybe you don't need to burn a top-level match to get existing ROH fans to buy the first-ever ROH pay-per-view. Like, the live crowd, you guys were certainly molten hot the whole pay-per-view. The show was sold out before, like we said, without announcing a card. So from even a live ticket sale perspective, they didn't need to burn a match to fill the Manhattan Center for the show. And so this first pay-per-view, I would say, is not really we're giving you our biggest stuff first impression show. It's we're giving you great talent and A+ level effort and atmosphere, but we're saving the bigger matches for what's next. This pay-per-view, like, it's kind of shocking to the degree, is all about setting up the future, because if you look, the great thing this match does is it basically sets up the rest of the year for Ring of Honor, because the next pay-per-view has Danielson versus Nigel in it. So this match sets that up. The DVD version of that show has Danielson versus Kenta on it. Well, this match sets that up. The pay-per-view after that has the Briscoes versus Steen and Generico in the Ladder War and Danielson versus Morishima. Well, this pay-per-view sets those up to a new fan, even though that was the Steen feud was the existing one. And the pay-per-view after that has Nigel versus Morishima for the title, which this Again, the show is setting that up. So this match is smart that if it does its job and makes you want to see all those guys wrestle each other in singles matches, well, Gabe is going to sell those matches to you on pay-per-view for the rest of the year. That's the whole rest of the year laid out for you. As a match, I feel very similar to you about this match. I feel about this main event the way I feel like about a lot of these dream tag partners matches where it's like big name wrestlers just thrown together for one night, where it's good. In fact, I would call this better than good. I'd call this low grade, like 4 stars. Like I'm kind of similar to you where I think this is a great match. I may be like a little less than you, but very similar, where I would put a notch below the Briscoes tag on this night. But I would also call this a great match. I will say, it's like most dream tags, it's never as great as my wildest hopes and dreams based on the talent involved, because my expectations for what those people are capable of is, the absolute, the sky is the ceiling. But at the same time, it was really good, and I feel like the one other flaw with these, but you kind of touched on this. One of the flaws of these dream tag matches is a lot of times it feels less like a cohesive match and more like a bunch of sneak previews of singles matches you want to see. But like you were kind of saying, that's kind of the point, I guess. When you look at what's coming up, is this match feels like, oh, you're getting these little, rather than being maybe as much as it feels like a tag match. To me, it felt more like you're getting these little snippets of all the singles matches you want to see for the rest of the year. And in a way, one of the strengths of this match is the 4 guys involved. There's never a pairing of these 4 guys that I don't want to see. Like sometimes in tag matches, you're like, man, I want this guy to tag out because I want to see, this is the matchup I want to see. Every pairing of these 4 guys I want to see. And, I thought everyone looked really good here. I thought it was like they were really trying to protect Nigel and losing. He doesn't take the fall. They actually have Kenta take the fall over him. He gets to do the biggest spot of the match when he does the crossbody off the top turnbuckle onto Morishima in the crowd, which is usually more of a Danielson type spot. And then he gets what you described, that dramatic late match moment where he hurts his elbow and has to have a staffer frantically tape it up. And, that allows Morishima and Bryan to team up against Kenta, and then Nigel comes in and he uses the bad arm to hit the lariat, even though it causes him a lot of anguish. And I will say I really like that idea, but my one problem with it is that it happens so late in the match and Nigel isn't out of the match for very long, so it doesn't get a chance to really build to be as much of a story or as dramatic as it could have been if, Kenta was just beat to shit for a long time and Nigel finally came in at the end and did that. But I felt like this was Gabe it was Gabe knowing that Nigel's going to be his big future world champion later in the year, going, I don't want his team to win, but I'm going to protect him as much as I can, where Kenta will take the fall by him. Nigel will get the coolest spot of the match with the dive into the crowd, and he'll get this really big dramatic story fighting through the pain moment at the end of the match too. But yeah, it's 4 great wrestlers in front of a super pumped crowd, working really hard to have a fun match. They don't do much that you haven't seen from them before, other than maybe that, like you mentioned, Nigel lariating Morishima mid-cartwheel, which was really cool. But they're just so talented. It's just a lot of fun. I do think it was funny that when Kenta hits the go to sleep, Lenny Leonard makes a point to call it the original go to sleep, I guess, to make sure, any fan that thinks Kenta's ripping off CM Punk to hopefully get the idea that actually it's the reverse.
Which I think is a reasonable thing to mention. Like, I think it's fair.
Exactly. But what I thought was funny was, as soon as he says that, Kenta proceeds to hit one of the worst looking go to sleeps I've seen him hit in ROH. Like, Kenta generally, as a rule, has a much better looking go to sleep than Punk, but in part usually because Kenta's knees usually look like they hit closer to the head. But here he hits Danielson way low in the stomach, and Danielson sells his head anyway. And I just imagine myself, this never happened, but just imagine myself telling someone, yeah, dude, you gotta watch this Kenta. He invented the go to sleep. It's way better than Punk's. And then they watch this match with me, and Kenta hits a go to sleep that is honestly like Punk hits a way better version of usually. Like, how stupid I would have looked, but luckily none of that happens. Lenny informs us early on during this match that Mark Briscoe has suffered a major concussion, has been taken to the hospital. Like, in storyline, how many concussions has Mark Briscoe suffered this year? Is it like 4, 5?
Well, you never know. It might not be off from the actual amount, too.
And so, that brings us to Meltzer's review of this match. He wrote, This match may also have been made better through the magic of editing because it was better than I was led to believe. They put over Samoa Joe and CM Punk when putting over the history of who had held the ROH title, and then Dave adds in parentheses, somehow I don't remember hearing Xavier's name. They said Samoa Joe had a 21-month reign and made it a world championship and called it him the Babe Ruth of ROH. It was done both to pay respect to Joe, but also to push videotape sales. Morishima is so impressive when it comes to the agility of a guy who looks to be around 315 pounds, 4 stars. Wade Keller gave this 4 1/4. So Wade actually liked this better than the Briscoes tag, which can't quite go with him there. But
I don't think it's crazy either.
No.
Like to have a slight preference for this one, depending on the style you like.
The Torturer at the time, ROH management was pleased with Bryan Danielson's return to ROH, feeling he looked better than ever in the ring and was totally refreshed. Management is confident Danielson is going to put together another great run this year for the company. Like, I just read this because I thought it was like, it's true. There's nothing wrong with what they said, but it's also funny. It's almost like Bryan Danielson is still good as like the least needed thing to tell any newsletter. Like, yeah. Guess what? Bryan Danielson is still amazing. But
yeah, although it's funny. I also think that Danielson was better than ever during this run, but I don't think you could know that from this match.
Yeah, you definitely could know it from the night earlier. He just was amazing the night before. And one other thing to remember too is we talked about on the last show where Nigel missed it. He was saving himself for the show. Nigel was really banged up for this match, which also makes this match a little more impressive. In fact, the Observer wrote, Nigel is all banged up and will be taking the next 3 weeks off of wrestling after this. So, yeah, he was really just saving himself just for this show. This show was a big deal to the talent. And after the match, Danielson grabs Morishima's ROH World title belt, and Morishima hits him with a backdrop driver. Nigel picks up the belt and hands it to Morishima, telling him that it's Morishima's. But then Nigel tries to continue to say something else, but Morishima lariats him mid-sentence, which gets a lot of boos. And then the pay-per-view ends with Morishima windmilling the ROH title belt as Lenny Leonard on commentary asks if anyone can stop Takeshi Morishima. So, Matt, I thought before we get to the other matches, we would talk a bit about what we thought about the pay-per-view. But first, let's go with the pundits thought. Let's go with the fans thought, because something that the Observer got to do, which they always did for pay-per-views, and since ROH was never on pay-per-view, they never got to do, was they got to do one of the classic Observer reader polls where people could write in and give a thumbs up, thumbs down, best match, worst match. Respect is earned in the Observer, got 66 thumbs up, 0 thumbs down, 0 thumbs in the middle. So a unanimous thumbs up. The best match, 51 people thought was Briscoes versus Castagnoli and Seidel. 13 people thought it was Morishima and Danielson versus Kenta and McGuinness. No other match got votes. Worst match, 22 people thought it was Morishima versus Whitmer. 12 people thought it was Strong versus Delirious. And then Dave wrote a bit of an extended review of the show in the Observer. He wrote, quote, I've been a big fan of ROH from the beginning. Almost every show I've seen has been good, and many have been great. ROH has presented some of the best matches of the past few years, and this year is no exception. But in trying to watch this, I was trying to look at it from a casual, first-time fan viewpoint. Admittedly difficult to impossible, but that was the idea. There are inherent problems, although there are no solutions to these problems. The big one is pro wrestling, as well as all sports, have changed greatly over the past decades, from being a gritty deal based around the drama of the matches to a full-blown entertainment spectacle. ROH can't be that. It doesn't have the money. Any attempt to compete with UFC or WWE means losing tens of millions in a short period of time with no guarantee, nor even decent odds of success. Most people aren't going to sample, and many who do will see it as cheap, with the wrestlers looking far too normal. Whatever steroid use there may be doesn't appear to be significant, and the guys here simply can't afford the chemicals to give them the major league bodies the average fan associates with wrestling. And also too young. They come across as kids doing amazing moves. Their names aren't known. A big problem I saw them facing is that while the first pay-per-view gave you great matches, from that standpoint, it was up there with the best pay-per-view shows of the year. Most fans wouldn't know anyone on the show. It's one thing when you have some familiar faces and then can slowly build new faces off them. TNA has done that to a degree, although not as well as many would like. But by going to pay-per-view and losing the TNA guys, ROH doesn't even have that for the TNA fans. What was good was that from the moment the show started, you had a hot crowd. Visually, it looked like the old ECW as the Manhattan Manhattan Center was the size of arena ECW often played in. If anything, the way the crowd treated the big stars was even better than ECW crowd would. The crowd played a big part because if you didn't know who Takeshi Morishima, Nigel McGuinness, or Bryan Danielson were, the one thing you did know within minutes of the start of the show is that the people in the arena knew them and considered them big stars. When you see it, it makes you think at least think there must be something to these guys. The only drawback is the setting. While bigger than where TNA tapes, they didn't spend the money on production that TNA does, nor did they have primetime exposure to around 2 million people watching each week. As for the show itself, I can't imagine anyone who buys wrestling for good matches not being completely satisfied. There are no matches of the year on the show, but there probably will be candidates on show number 2, like the Nigel McGuinness Bryan Danielson match that starts running in September. But the wrestling more than lived up to what it needed to be, which was a level above all but the best WWE and TNA shows. And unlike with WWE and TNA, every match was good to great. You didn't have 2 and 3 great matches and the rest so-so with a stinker thrown in. If anything, there was too much wrestling. There were pieces introducing different people, like a vignette for Brent Albright, an interview segment with Larry Sweeney and Tank Tolan, whose jacked up physique makes him unique as opposed to a short guy who looks like all the tall guys as he did on SmackDown and is played up tongue-in-cheek as an example of a natural athlete, as well as Adam Pearce. The announcing by Dave Prazak and Lenny Leonard was good in the sense that they told you who the wrestlers were, built up their big moves, and emphasized their key spots. For a first-time viewer, it's the only way to play it. But even they look young, and while you want young, under most circumstances, you need a base of established stars who have built long-time credibility. It's a luxury they don't have, and ROH wouldn't work if they brought in the aging legend type for matches unless it was rare and the right guy in the right situation. A Jim Cornette type would help, but the split with TNA makes that impossible. ROH has always been something I've recommended to people who are about to give up wrestling because what they are looking for is gone. For some, if they're looking for the stars of their childhood, there's no solution as time moves on. If they're looking for the style of their childhood, that isn't here either. But if you're looking at wrestling where you usually get clean winners, guys work hard, and the cream rises to the top, this is it. If a guy has a breakthrough performance or shows skill in any facet, whether it be talking, flying, or working, it's emphasized and they'll be moved up the card. They can't afford to hold talent back. While you can argue judging on who should be number 1 or number 2, or whether Takeshi Morishima should hold the belt, you really can't argue anyone who's a top talent is held back. The camera shot, production, and building would appeal greatly to a disenfranchised ECW fan. To me, that's the prime audience they should be targeting. The promo style, to no surprise, will come across like ECW. The main difference is ECW always had familiar names who were great talkers, which ROH doesn't have, and ROH has wrestling that blows away ECW on its best day. If the idea of a match is to draw the crowd in, whether you think they did too much, which in some cases I'd say, then this show succeeded greatly. I would say one thing that's interesting about that, which I think is weird, again, another thing that I think would be the complete opposite today, is Dave harping on multiple times that too many people in ROH look too young.
I just can't even imagine thinking that. You know, like that's just seems like very bizarre. Like that I mean, I've never heard of that criticism about anything in wrestling. They look too young.
And the Jim Cornette should be here thing. I mean, Dave sure loved himself some Jim Cornette back then, and that's yet another you haven't been watching every show because
yeah, exactly.
He would not have helped this company at this point.
It's just not getting it's just not understanding the fan base.
I'm going to cut for the benefit of time Wade Keller's long review. He gave it an 8 out of 10. The PW Torch Roundtable, James Caldwell gave it a 9. Sean Radican gave it a 9. Jason Powell gave it 8.5. Bruce Mitchell gave it an 8. Wade said stuff like, for in-ring wrestling, it was off the charts compared to the athleticism and state-of-the-art innovative moves you get from TNA and WWE. For presentation, it was a mixed bag, and Wade liked it, but he felt certain things, blah blah blah. Presentation, all that stuff. Wade talked a lot, and I am going to skip all of it. And then finally, we'll go quickly to PW Insider. As you can imagine, the morale for the Ring of Honor crew was extremely high after the taping of the pay-per-view. RH owner Kerry Silkin was very happy about the show and felt that several of the performers on the pay-per-view had taken their work to a new level. Rocky Romero and Claudio Castagnoli in particular were considered the two who really elevated themselves. Of the match,
I think that's true, by the way.
Yeah. All were of the matches taped, all were good with only one. Strong versus Delirious is the match described as not really getting over strongly with the live crowd as well as the others, but editing can always fix that. And then Gabe told the PW Torch, quote, "The pay-per-view taping surpassed even my expectations. The entire thing was a highlight to me. I can't wait for July for people to see this show." Matt, before we get to the other matches, what did you think about the pay-per-view?
I was disappointed when I first saw it just because of like what I expected a first pay-per-view to be. Again, ECW Barely Legal was my comparison point, even though obviously that was totally different than what they were going for. Watching it now without any of that context, without any expectations of what I thought a first pay-per-view should be, I thought the show was fantastic. I just thought like great wrestling for 2 hours, fast-paced, hard hitting, a great example of what the ROH style is. Everyone was working their ass off. The crowd was going crazy. This is why I always defend Ring of Honor in 2007. Just the wrestling quality was really, really high. Like compare this to anything in October, November of 2006.
Yeah.
This is just things have improved so much since that sort of bleak period. And people don't give 2007 the credit that it deserves, but we've seen a lot of great shows so far this year. And I think, in terms of like top to bottom, this might be the best one. Of course, it's cheating because it's only 2 hours and they cut out the stuff that wouldn't have fit that. But still, like, this was just such a high level wrestling show that I think it holds up now way better than it seemed at the time. That's my opinion.
So I thought this was a very good pay-per-view, but it's something's just missing for me. Like I should be saying it's absolutely great because you are right. Like if you look at it, it's a 2 hour show. I would say it's a 4 match show because I wouldn't include the squash, and every match, 2 of the matches were good. 2 of them were great, and you had one really great 5-minute angle with the Steam Generico stuff. Like it was enjoyable from start to finish. I think the thing that that maybe makes it feel a little different to me, and again, like you were saying, the crowd is fantastic, is I didn't need the in-ring stuff, and I kind of missed like the pacing of the show is very, very wrestling dense, even by ROH, which is naturally a wrestling dense company. And I think like the very quick edits between stuff and, the editing out a bunch of the entrances even, it was like, I kind of missed the more familiar cadence of a regular 3 hour ROH show where you got full entrances and it was a little bit more relaxed where this is very much, we're squeezing in everything. So if there's even 1 second that's not needed, we're cutting away. Like
I think that continues with the pay-per-view, that pacing.
Yeah, and it's understandable because it's 2 hours, but I feel there's just something about that was like, I think I think it's a very good show. I absolutely recommend it to watch. But I do feel like if you were a new fan, I think you would come away being like, if you want just the densest wrestling product, like the most action per minute in wrestling, this would be a great signpost for that. I think if you were trying to do any other aspect of Ring of Honor, and there are other aspects to it, even though that was one of its main selling points, like I could say, I guess what I'm saying is I could see this pay-per-view really appealing to a certain kind of new fan, although I think that new fan would have already searched out ROH long before this. And I think there's a certain other kind of fan where they would be like, oh, this isn't to me. This is almost too dry, like too much wrestling almost.
Yeah, well, I mean, ROH isn't for them, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I guess what I would say is like, if you're talking about like, what ROH show have we watched that if somebody now watched it and was like, what would be the most entertaining beginning to end ROH show that you could watch today in 2025, this would be kind of high on the list. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you were going to watch like a full, because it's short, it's sweet, it's to the point, and it has great action that looks good now.
Well, and the thing that I think kind of hurts it a little bit, makes that vibe a little weird to me in my eyes, is also one of the things that's its strength, which is that by cutting it down to 2 hours and being so tight with the editing, I kind of missed that full show vibe and a little bit more error in things, like between things. But on the same time, yeah, it does make in a way a better introduction in the sense of it's a very like there is no stick out lower mid card match that isn't that good. That's just there. Like it is all killer, no filler. Yeah, as a first impression, not giving the fans a chance to breathe in that sense is a good thing. That there's nothing bad here. Then that brings us to the second disc, which is thankfully about an hour, and hopefully we'll speed through this and get to a 4-hour show. But Yeah, so these were all the things that did not make the pay-per-view. They were taped throughout the night, so they weren't all in the order. Like these matches did not happen after everything we just talked about. In
And
fact,
I'm not even totally positive that they knew when they taped it which of these would and would not be on the pay-per-view either.
Yeah, I think there's one or two things I'm going to point out where it seems that way. And we'll go into this match, which is the first thing we see on the second DVD, which is actually the opening of the entire show in real life before even the BJ Whitmer stuff. And that's Brent Albright defeated Tank Toland, escorted to the ring by Bobby Dempsey and Larry Sweeney via pinfall in 6 minutes, 48 seconds after he hit the half Nelson suplex. Because again, this was a 2 DVD set. This is the DVD 2 with all the extra stuff. For this second DVD, it actually is like a normal Ring of Honor show where we don't get the fancy little highlight packages and name graphics they use for the pay-per-view, but we get full entrances. It doesn't feel like they're in as a rush. So this basically feels like more like a regular RH DVD release. Prazak on commentary even welcomes us during this match to the non-pay-per-view portion of the event. Another interesting thing here is Tank Toland and Brent Albright had just wrestled each other weeks before this match for the Extreme Wrestling Federation in Indiana in not just any match, but they faced each other in the finals of the Extreme 8 tournament where Tank beat Brent Albright to win the whole thing, which is just such a, indie wrestling is a wide river, Matt. And you know who Tank beat in the semifinals of that tournament, Matt? A young up-and-comer named Tyler Black.
Wow.
Whatever happened to him? So this is a match I would describe as rough in spots with a couple moments I really liked. There are moments where these two seem off together, like little hitches before moves, like it's taking them an extra second or two to prepare. You can see them talking to each other a fair bit. Toland also takes a backdrop where I think he was trying to land on a seat, but instead he takes this wild tumble of a bump that I actually think looked pretty cool, but the crowd, being a New York crowd, gets on Tank chanting, "You fucked up," very loudly, which was getting rare to Ring of Honor at this point, but there were certain things New York crowds would do that the other crowds had evolved past at this point. So Matt, as always, a bad influence on his city, but
no, not at all. But I've always said New York crowds could be total assholes.
Yeah, no. To be fair, you have always not been afraid to deeply criticize where you live. But the Trevor gets a kick out of Tank Toland tour continues because he pops out a new workout based spot here where he puts Albright in a sitting position, and he sits behind Albright. He wraps his legs around Albright's midsection, and then he starts doing sit-ups behind Albright, and every time he comes up for a sit-up, he hits Albright in the back of the head with his elbows, and I thought it was great. It's so ridiculous. Again, I also like Tank Toland doing this spinning hammer throw of a double axe handle, almost like a discus axe handle. I thought that was really cool. It played into his strongman vibes. Brent wins in not that long of a match, but he actually gave Tank a fair bit of the offense here. And overall, between the roughness, the couple moments I liked, and the fact that it wasn't that long, I think it averages out to like an average. I thought this was average.
It was faster paced than I expected, though, and I think this was another match where it seemed like they were maybe going harder than they would have if it wasn't pay-per-view night. Like it does seem that way to me. Even with the sloppiness, even though it was still like there was some comedy involved. Those sit-ups with the elbows to the side of the head. That's very good for the obliques. Did you know that, Trevor? There was some cool spots like, just in terms of being impressive, Toland pressing Albright over his head. You could, like, even for a guy as jacked as Toland, that's impressive. You know what I mean? The jumping jacks on Albright's chest, which is a spot that he's incorporated a lot now. And then lifting Albright with one arm. Like, again, impressive even for a guy as big as Tank Toland. But like you said, yeah, the spot where Albright's supposed to block a spinning clothesline with a kick, like they kind of messed that up once. But it's just like a hot crowd and pure entertainment. This was fine. So yeah. I would say it was fine. And I've just continued to really enjoy the Tank Toland character for what he is.
And how hot was this crowd? Brent Albright got a big chant after the match. That's how hot this crowd was. But we then go backstage where the No Remorse core of Roderick Strong, Davey Richards, and Rocky Romero are standing by. As Davey and Rocky practice some boxing, Roddy introduces the three of them. Davey points to his No Remorse core t-shirt and says, "It's not just a t-shirt or attitude. It's a way of life." Davey says he's going to show us what that means, and he pulls Pele Primo into frame, saying they want to show people what no remorse means, asking Pele if he'll help. Pelly says yes, and they immediately tear his t-shirt off his chest. They hold his arms back, and they just fucking destroy him with some super hard chops and kicks to the chest before tossing him hard into the wall. Rocky tells Marufuji that was just a taste of what will happen tonight, which I was alluding to this earlier. I think if there's a segment on this DVD that definitely feels like it was maybe meant for the pay-per-view, it's this, since he's alluding to a match that
right. They tell Rocky to go out there and beat Marufuji. Yeah, this is definitely meant to be before that match.
Yeah. And that brings us to Davey Richards defeating Eric Stevens via submission in 10 minutes, 3 seconds when he made Stevens tap out to the Kimura. At 10 minutes and 3 seconds, this is actually the longest match of the non-pay-per-view bouts on the show, which maybe supports the theory that maybe all of these matches weren't supposed to be on the pay-per-view because it feels like, or at least they were rushing because some of those other matches went long, like Gabe said. But either way, this is the most substantial match we get on the bonus DVD. So what'd you think about this match, Matt?
Yeah, if of all the matches, I think this is the one where I'm like, maybe they thought this could be on the pay-per-view. I'm not positive or anything, but, they were working really hard. There was, a sequence in the middle that got kind of slow, but, it started out hot and heavy with Davey attacking Eric and Eric attacking him, and they're going on the floor, and Stevens does an impressive running forearm off the apron to the floor, which got a lot of speed and looked very impactful when he landed. I was actually really impressed with that spot. They do, have some pretty uncomfortable moments where they try to do a top rope, one of those vertical suplexes over the top rope where they both flip over the top rope. That does not go well the first time they do it. They bounce back, and Richard acts like he intentionally hit Stevens with a DVD. And, he has to stall for a little bit. And then they sort of repeat the spot, but Stevens doesn't go all the way over. He just suplexes Davey to the floor. So, they never actually get that spot off. So that's like a big weakness in the match, that whole sequence. But as the match goes down the stretch, they do have some legitimately great sequences. There's a spot where Richards runs at the corner, Stevens moves, so Richards backflips off the turnbuckle, ducks a clothesline, then hits the handspring kick, but Stevens doesn't go down, he stays up, he hits a big clothesline, and then hits a pump handle powerbomb for a near fall. I thought that sequence was great. They do some fighting spirit sequences where Stevens pops up, but Richards follows by dumping him on his head with a Saito suplex. And then the finish is Stevens blocks the DR driver, but puts Richards on the top rope, but Richards jumps off the ropes with a DDT and then locks in the Kimura for the tap out. So there were good spots at the beginning and the end. There were some really rough spots in the middle. I think it averages out to a solid match. It definitely didn't go as smoothly as they wanted it to, but I could see flashes of good stuff in there that they were going for. So I think I understand why it would have not made the cut if they had been considering it, but I see the potential of a great match between these two in there, even though this wasn't it.
I like this match a little bit more than you. I thought this hit a sweet spot for its role on the show. It's not an important match on the night. It's not making it to the pay-per-view. It's not here to steal the show. But I think it finds a real good middle ground, even with its length. Much less than this, and I feel like I would have felt that it felt a little insubstantial. But if you made the match much longer this, and I think it might not really fit its role on this card. You don't want the long matches are reserved for the pay-per-view. This match on the show is, to me, sometimes you watch those 4-person relay races and the announcers talk about how it's those races where each person only runs a quarter of the race and they hand off the baton to the next runner. And sometimes those announcers talk about how there's 2 people on this 4-person team that are the really fast runners where the race is going to live or die on them. And then there's another runner where maybe they're a very average runner, and when it's their turn, their job is basically we don't expect you to gain time, but don't lose time. Just kind of keep a good pace. And I feel like this match was kind of like that in the relay race, where its time was basically, be 10 minutes of fun action, don't steal the show or burn the crowd out, don't bring them down in any way. And I feel like it hit that level where whatever momentum level this show had going into this match, I feel like it has the exact same level of momentum coming out of this match. And for some undercard matches on some shows, that's sometimes what you want. And this match isn't particularly smart. It isn't particularly involved. It's just 10 minutes of pretty good effort. Davey is never scared to play the goofy heel. And here he tries to leave through the curtains. He tries to escape through the front row where a fan dumps a beer all over him. I thought he and Stevens actually had fairly good chemistry, with the exception of that horrific Davey trying to do the we suplex both of us over the top rope thing, a move that went so wrong. I posted an image, a video, a clip of it on Twitter and Blue Sky, and someone at the time replied and said, Eric has a story about how working with, boy, does Eric have a story about working with Davey in that match. And someone said, you should tag him so he tells the story. And someone did, and he never told that story, at least that I saw. But apparently he has a story to tell about working with Davey in this match. But I thought it was really hilarious because it's a great example of sometimes if a spot goes horribly wrong, if you just act with confidence like you meant to do it, which is what Davey did immediately after that spot, you hear this crowd like pop for it. Like maybe some of those fans thought, oh, I guess that's a new move. Like when it was clearly just a horrific botch. But and I did appreciate that when they redid the move, which normally is such a groan that it's a faux pas to redo a move right after you botch it. But I like that Davey actually had Eric reverse it, so it kind of came back to haunt him. I thought Stevens did very well here. He had some really cool offensive moments, like that fantastic looking running form off the apron. And he also does that wrist clutch pump handle sit out powerbomb thingy, and it looks so badass. It's worth all those descriptors. Like normally you have that many descriptors for a move, not worth it. It was pretty damn cool. Also, Stevens being for one of the larger guys in ROH at this time, he's not afraid to bump. Like, he takes a big bump off the apron into the barricade. He goes up for that Scioto suplex you mentioned, stuff like that. And it's cool, but part of me wonders if maybe he should have wrestled a little bit more to his size, trying to craft a bit more of an aura. Like, I'm not saying he could have pulled off or been allowed to work like more Shima, but maybe he should have projected his size and strength a little bit more, because he really bumps like a guy, like a 5'10" guy when he's one of the bigger guys on the roster. I also enjoyed the ending where Davey does the tornado DDT into the Kimura, because he just has a really nice transition from one move to the other. Like, overall, I would call this a good little 3-star flat 10-minute mid-card match. And then we next see the second part of the 4-video series of Jimmy Jacobs' dates with Lacey. These aired on YouTube over a few days. ROH put the first one on the last DVD, and they put the other 3 parts on this disc of this DVD. For this one, Jimmy and Lacey are driving in Chicago. Jimmy says he used to kind of not like Chicago because of certain people that live here, obviously referencing Colt Cabana, but he's gone now. Jimmy asks if Lacey's ever been to the Sears Tower. She hasn't. Jimmy says he was once there on a date. We then cut to a graphic that says Jimmy Jacobs, in association with ROH Wrestling, presents Can't Buy Me Love. Jimmy is taking Lacey to a fancy district of Chicago for a shopping spree that he says is on him. Jimmy tries to open the door to Brooks Brothers, but it's locked, so they walk away. And if you look carefully at the very last second, you can see Lacey's on the verge of bursting out laughing out of character. So I don't know if this was like a legit, like they didn't expect Brooks Brothers to be closed. I don't know.
I think so. That's what I think.
We cut to Jimmy doing a solo interview in his hotel room. He thinks he hit a home run today. Every girl likes shopping, and he bought Lacey some nice things, including a fur coat. We see Lacey, in fact, coming out of a store wearing a fur coat. Lacey is happy, but thinks it's a bit much, wondering how Jimmy can afford this. She says, I know I'm not paying you enough. Lacey says the days are improving, and we cut to a Lacey solo hotel interview where Lacey is impressed with how today went. And in a line that made me laugh, she says, quote, I guess I wasn't aware he was making that much money in Lacey's Angels. I love the idea. She's not aware how much he's making working for her.
Well, she even said it during the skit. She was like, I know I'm not paying you this much.
Yeah. We cut to Jimmy in his hotel room where he says, that's what credit cards are for. What's a few $1,000s in debt to show that you love? We then have Jimmy walking Lacey to her hotel room, just like that, just like at the end of day one. Lacey thanks Jimmy for a lovely day and all the stuff. Jimmy says he'd do anything for her, and Lacey says that's very sweet before giving Jimmy a hug. Lacey in a solo interview thinks that when Jimmy was at the door with her, he went for something that wasn't there, maybe more than a hug, but it was definitely a nice day. Jimmy in his solo interview says, will love lift us up where we belong? Jimmy asks the interviewer if Lacey was going in for something on the hug, and then Jimmy walks away singing that song. So I definitely have big thoughts about when we get to the 4th segment. I don't know if you have any thoughts about this segment. But I guess we will continue on then.
Maybe we should save our thoughts for the totality.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Next, we have Sarah Del Rey defeating Daisy Hayes via pinfall in 5:52. Del Rey, this is a match where it feels like, again, we talked about earlier, she has not joined Sweet and Sour Incorporated in this match. She has switched her theme music from that Billy Talent song to Fly of the Valkyries, but she comes out to the ring without Sweeney and company, and she's slapping hands like a babyface. So this feels like something they did before the turn. This match made me sad and mad, Matt. In one sense, this was your standard ROH 5-minute women's match, but there's a segment of the crowd that was not just against this match, but in a way that was so retrograde. Like, you can hear a chant of boring late in the match when Daisy is in a powerbomb position, i.e. her crotch is in Sarah's face. A bunch of people do the weird horny, ooh, like cat call kind of response. The previous year or more of ROH, it feels like the crowds had advanced to generally like respecting the women's effort and not sexualizing them. And then once in a while you get a crowd like this, a reaction like this, usually in New York, and it feels like we've time traveled back 5 years earlier. And it probably doesn't help that the first half of this match is at a somewhat slower pace, and it's just about Del Rey clobbering Daisy, which probably wasn't the best first impression for those in the crowd that were giving any women's match here little to no chance. This match, though, for only being 5 minutes, it actually does have structure in that it's the big woman dominating, and when Daisy makes her comeback with the Tornado Daisy Cutter and a couple nice running chops, even the haters seem to shut up for like just a second. And near the end, we also get this really cool moment where Del Rey has Daisy in the Royal Butterfly, that elevated butterfly lock, and it looks like she's going to do what she usually does, which is lift her from that into a power slam, but instead she lifts her up even more over her head into a gory special, which was a really cool looking transition. But unfortunately, the match ended on a down, awkward note where Del Rey has Daisy in kind of a torture rack, and it looks like Daisy was supposed to counter it somehow, but she just ends up falling to the mat, and Daisy just kind of sits on her to get the pinfall. And I was just so sad that of all nights and all times to have a weird flub finish like that, it had to be in front of this crowd, where some of the fans were being dicks from the start, in a weird way you kind of validate their unfair bias. Just like a feel-bad match from a vibe sense with a really ugly finish.
It's interesting. I did not notice that the finish was botched. That didn't occur to me. So it just looked like she tried to slip out to roll up Del Rey, but Del Rey got her in a pinning combo. That's how it looked to me. I got to go back and watch it. It looked like she was trying to go
for a crucifix or something, and she just falls, and then Del Rey's just like, well, I guess I'll just sit on her. And then the match ends.
I got to watch that again. That did not occur to me as I watched it. I do agree with you that the crowd were assholes. I'm like, it didn't get to me as much as you, because just like fucking New York, even in the last match, they do something that annoys me. But in the match that we're going to review next. But I will say this was a faster pace than the previous match. And man, it would be nice to just let them go for 15 minutes and see what they could do. Obviously, this wasn't the crowd to do it, but at the same time, maybe it was, because despite those assholes, that still wasn't most of the crowd. You know what I mean? There was a vocal minority. You know what I mean?
Yeah, after the match, Daisy and Sarah shake hands, and Sarah seems to gesture that they're 1-1 right now, and she wants a third match. So again, she's acting again, kind of very gracious for someone that just joined Sweet and Sour. But we then get our third Jimmy and Lacey vignette. This time, Jimmy has taken Lacey to some kind of beach where we see people are holding a sign that says World Falun Dafa Day. I had to look this up to show my cultural ignorance. It's actually a holiday to celebrate the Chinese religion, Falun Gong. Our title card for this episode is Falling Apart, which is not quite a Justin Shapiro level pun, but I appreciate the Ring of Honor effort. I want to note that this is happening outside much of this one video, and the wind sound is oppressive. But we see in this segment Jimmy give Lacey his jacket. We see Jimmy walking near a fountain, which he thinks is great. Lacey thinks Jimmy likes it a little too much. A solo Jimmy post-mortem interview sees him call it a rough day. He says, started off nice at the beach, and then we see him running around towards a mass of seagulls with his cane and scaring them away. Jimmy then sells his knee is hurt at this point. We then see Jimmy taking Lacey to a Ferris wheel. Lacey asks how Jimmy knew that she loved Ferris wheels, and Jimmy says he knows everything about her. In his solo interview, Jimmy reveals that he saw it on her MySpace. He says it worked out perfect until he said that comment. We then cut to Jimmy and Lacey talking while looking out the city. Jimmy says he's been miserable a lot, but Lacey's love is the one thing that can make him happy, and he doesn't want to take care of her. He wants to take care of her. He doesn't want Lacey to be a 9 to 5 woman. He wants her to be able to stay at home while he takes care of her. Lacey is not impressed by that and sells going from having a good time to being turned off, asking to be taken back to the hotel, as Jimmy says he still has more plans for today. Lacey in her civil interview says, the day started nice. She doesn't know how Jimmy knew she liked Ferris wheels, but she hated Jimmy's stay-at-home comment, which she took as an insult because she's going to give him the benefit of the doubt because the thought behind it was nice, and they'll see how day 4 goes. We cut back to Jimmy driving Lacey to the hotel, where Jimmy is groveling about the stay-at-home comment and apologizing, saying that Lacey can do whatever she wants in life. Jimmy offers to walk her to the hotel room, but she doesn't want it. He insists on opening the car door at least. She does not take the offer of a hug, and Jimmy slams the car door in frustration. Jimmy in an interview says he doesn't know how tomorrow's going to go. He has 1 day to salvage this, and he thinks he's going to pull something big out of his sleeve. And that brings us to our final match of the DVD, a 4 corners tag team scramble match where El Generico and Kevin Steen defeated Adam Pearce and Jimmy Rave, Irish Airborne of Dave and Jake Christ, and Mitch Franklin and Pele Primo in 7 minutes, 35 seconds when Steen wasn't involved, when Steen pinned Dave Christ after hitting a package pile driver. Matt, before I throw it to you, Brian Alvarez in Figure 4 Weekly wrote, and I quote, said to be the best match on the show with tons of insane high spots.
What?
Yeah.
The best match on the show?
That's what he said. So he said someone told him this was the. And look, I'll just spoil it. I like this match. It is not a 7.5 minute scramble match. Is not the best match on this show or most shows.
Not on this show, that's for sure. I'm trying to think if I would rank the matches. Where would this go? Well, certainly behind, I would say, every match on the pay-per-view.
And I just want to note, this is such a Brian Alvarez thing. Every other live report was like Claudio, with maybe one exception for maybe the main event tag, but every other live report was like Claudio and Seidel versus the Briscoes was the clear match of the show. And somehow Brian Alvarez in Figure 4 Weekly is the one person who was like, you know what I heard the best match on the show was? The 7.5 minute scramble.
This is probably the 6th best match on the show, I would say, off the top of my head. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's fun, but it's a 7.5 minute match. It's just cotton candy, right? It's
right.
like just a bunch of spots.
It's not like even a real standout scramble match. Like they didn't do anything that memorable, you know? Like there's very little memorable about the match. It's fun. Like it's like like everything is well executed. Or at least well executed enough. I thought the standouts, actually, it's funny, were Pele Primo, who, I gotta say, he doesn't look out of place at all. You know, even with his lack of experience, like, he looks like he belongs with every one of these people. And when you consider that two of those people are El Generico and Kevin Steen, 2 of people who I would consider 2 of the best wrestlers in North America at this time, like, I think that's pretty impressive. Like, Primo has never gotten a chance in ROH to do a real, like, long singles match, and I would have been curious to see him try, but, like, in this sequence, he's gotten to the level where he seems just as good as everybody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The thing that the crowd did that annoyed me was the Repo Man stuff. Obviously, it's not a big deal, and it's a good, like, you know, it's a fine heel move for Pierce, and he was ready for it. He had the Repo Man mask that he pulled out to put on to work the crowd with that. But, like, it's a very, like, New York crowd thing. They're the only people that are into it, and it just made me feel like, oh, we're New York, so we have to connect everything to something we remember from the WWF. I think that's what annoyed me about it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It's not even like, oh, Barry Darso. Like if they had said, like, Crusher Khrushchev, I would have been less annoyed, I think, than them saying Repo Man. I don't know what it is. But anyway, as far as the match, you know, Steen gets to do a dive, flip onto the pile, but this wasn't a particularly dive-heavy match. The Irish Airborne hit stereo acai moonsaults at one point, but it really is mostly in the ring. It's a lot of Adam Pearce doing heel stuff, you know, Pele being chucked around. There's a spot where Pierce gets Mitch Franklin up in like a press position and like chucks him across the ring from the middle turnbuckle, which was pretty cool. I would say Rave doesn't do that much, but he is involved in the finish because he's almost gives Dave Christ a pedigree, and Generico breaks it up with like sort of like a mini haluva kick, and Steen hits the package pile driver on Dave for the win. But Steen and Generico get to do a few things to stand out, but again, not the craziest of the crazy stuff that they do. Um, I'm trying to see like what some of the highlights were. Irish Airborne, I would say they do fine in their big return. It was definitely surprising to see them here in this spot. They did a lot of their, fancy arm drags and stuff, but nobody really did anything that crazy. It was just short and entertaining and fine. But yeah, I'd say it went down easy, but it was far from special or memorable.
Yeah, like by again going to that quote Brian gave of insane high spots. There were high spots in this match. I wouldn't call anything I saw here insane, especially in the
Yeah,
context of
none.
the rest of the show.
No
Um,
insane high spots.
I will. Actually, well, I will say Mitch Franklin took a couple brutal bumps. I
Well,
felt
well, that
like,
that chucking across the ring, that's like the one thing.
yeah, and even when El Generico gave him the Blue Thunder Bomb, this time it looked almost like a cross between a Blue Thunder Bomb and that Chuck Taylor moved the awful waffle. Like he almost landed on his head. And
True.
you know,
Although
Mitch,
that was less of an insane high spot and more of like a botch, I think. But yes.
yeah, like a possibly fortunate botch. But yeah. Apart from that, and yeah, about the Repo Man thing, I kind of agree. Where you know he pulls out he gets Chad Repo Man because it's happened in New York before. Pierce anticipated it this time and pulls out a Repo Man style mask and wears it. And it's one of those things where why I didn't like it is maybe a little different than you, which is like I think when they chant Repo Man organically on the previous show, it's kind of like a mildly amusing, funny moment in one show. But it's one of those things where like if you play up to it, it's going to happen all the time. And it's like I don't want to see this all the time. It's like I don't want this to be a thing.
It's too one note.
Yeah, it's like a one note thing should happen one time. And when you start playing into it, but then again, wrestling has a long history of one note things that people have built like profitable careers on. So who am I to give advice?
Yes, but those things are often annoying.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. But yeah, I thought this was like when I called it cotton candy wrestling earlier, that's because it's like it's enjoyable in the moment and it's going to dissolve from your memory the instant you stop the match ends, unless you are whoever wrote that live report to Brian Alvarez. It was good workmanlike booking. It was a perfectly fun little diversion. It was like very workmanlike booking, and you could see Gabe's gears turning of like it's a way to get Pierce and Rave on the pay-per-view card, if not the pay-per-view itself. It's a way to give Steen and Generico another win to give them momentum since they're feuding with the Briscoes. Checks off a couple boxes. And then we have our last Jimmy and Lacey vignette, and then I'm going to have some thoughts on this. Jimmy picks up Lacey at the hotel room door and gives her a ring. Jimmy says it's not like he wants to marry her, it's just that he loves her. Lacey says she's got something to give Jimmy too, and we get our title card. This episode's entitled Behind Closed Doors. After some time, Lacey comes back out wearing a nightie, and Lacey and Jimmy tell the cameraman to come back later as they lay down on Lacey's bed. The cameraman pretends to leave, but then sneaks back in, and then because of him, we can see Jimmy between Lacey's open legs, the two of them working to get Jimmy's shirt off before they start making out. The camera guy then leaves, apparently satisfied with just this level of perving. He wanted to see something, Matt, but he didn't want to see the whole thing. We then get a graphic that says sometime later, SpongeBob SquarePants style, and the cameraman returns to the room saying, "Oh man, I wonder if we're done." And he sneaks in, and we see Lacey and Jimmy laying together under the covers. Lacey is smoking, saying she never smokes, but after that, she might have to start. Lacey says she doesn't know what she's been thinking, but after these last 4 days, she thinks she loves Jimmy too. Lacey snuggles herself under Jimmy's arm, and as the camera zooms in, we can see, unbeknownst to Lacey, that Jimmy looks strangely unhappy. Dun dun dun. But so that's the last segment on the show, and I gotta say something now. We talked after the first part of these, and really, I think it continues for the parts 2 and 3 that we saw before this part 4, that it was like admirably ambitious by the standards of ROH, but by the standards of any television drama or film we talked about in the last episode, it was pretty amateur from the acting, the writing, everything, the execution. Again, I would say for that first segment, that vibe continues for parts 2 and 3. But my fucking God, part 4, like you watch the first 3 parts and you get what they're trying to do. They're trying to tell this little story where every day Jimmy's doing a little bit better. He's winning over Lacey a little bit more every day. And you even have them doing the classic romantic comedy or romantic film plot arc where 3/4 of the way through the movie, or in this case, in the third of the 4 segments, something comes up to jeopardize the burgeoning relationship. But then in part 4, In part four, Jimmy's huge plan that he alludes to at the end of part three, where I've got a huge thing I got to pull out, his huge plan to win her back is to give her a ring. And Lacey, for her part, after being kind of turned off by Jimmy being clumsily sexist in part three, after ranging from kind of amused and having a good time to being weirded out by Jimmy on the prior 3 days, after Jimmy already bought her a bunch of clothes 2 days earlier to a different reaction, Lacey's reaction to being given a ring after a bad day 3 is to immediately put on some lingerie and have sex with him. After which she immediately decides that she loves him. I would say that even by the standards of pro wrestling, this is bad pacing, like the first 3 segments were bad writing and pacing and character development by the standards of Hollywood, of movies and TV. This the fourth one is bad, all of those things, by the standards of pro wrestling. This is like you took a 10-year-old and you asked him to write a romance film. It is that level of logic. It's like what a 10-year-old would think how romance works. Like you buy the pretty lady a ring and then they have whatever sex is and then she loves him. Like I will say that last shot plants a seed that we'll see the results down the line, and the choices they make there I actually think are interesting. We'll talk about them when they happen, but this was maybe the most ham-fisted, inelegant, like no one here is relatable in a human sense, AI written before AI was a thing level fourth segment. Like fuck.
I think AI would probably come up with like a more intricate way of getting to that point.
Yes.
Yeah, I listen, I mean obviously, no offense, I don't have the passion for this as you do about what the problems were, but I agree with you. I did think that throughout, like Lacey was not acting as the same character we had seen for the previous 2.5 years of ROH, or like whatever 5 years of the show. But like, would you agree with that? Like the Lacey we saw in these skits is not the same character. You know, she's like,
not even consistent within the segments, because like on the third segment when Jimmy says the sexist thing about, I don't want you to work, she gets really mad and cold to him. But then the post-date interview, she's like, his heart was in the right place. I'll give him another chance. It's almost like you're way less mad now than you were probably like an hour ago.
Well, that's honestly not that crazy, right? Something to cool off.
Maybe. I don't know. Man, I'm used to people staying mad at me.
Yeah. No one's ever been mad at you, Trevor.
So, yeah.
But yes, this last segment, it's like, that was lazy. I mean, I'm not as mad as you are, like, but it was just lazy. Like, they were just like, well, we got to get to this end point. So how are we going to get there? I don't fucking know. Just let's do it. Like that's how it felt. Lacey at different points being like, how could you afford this, Jimmy? Like Lacey wouldn't have cared, she would have been like, you fucking disgusting man. Like, she was never shrill during any of this stuff. Yeah, it really flattened her character a bit. Again, do I really care? No. Does it matter? Not really. I appreciated Jimmy's ambition, but yeah, it was weird that they didn't have a finish planned. They didn't like have like a turning point moment that would get this to happen. Some moment that caused them to be connected. Like it would have made more sense if they just went with what they were originally going to do, where they like slept together after the match in Detroit, as opposed to going through this whole like, no, I don't want to do that, I'm going to romance her, and then they just slept together anyway. You know what I mean? Like it was just Also, like, I don't know, it didn't seem like they did anything that fun either. Like they went shopping and then maybe they went on a Ferris wheel. Like,
and he took her bowling.
Yeah, this was in Chicago. Like you figure, there's plenty of stuff to do. Like I don't know. And also, you don't even get to see the Ferris wheel. They obviously didn't really go on the Ferris wheel.
They didn't even go to Pequods.
Yeah, I mean, and that was right across the street from the place that they had that Windy City death match, as we noted. If I'm gonna see a romantic comedy set in Chicago, I need to see somebody eating deep dish pizza.
See, that's the thing that bugs me, is that the first 3 ones, for whatever faults they had, at least like it followed a story that made sense, where I'm like, I can see where this is going. And then the fourth one is like you said, it's like they just had nothing. They were like, how does he win her back? How does he win her over? Gives her a ring and she fucks him. Like,
Yeah, they don't even leave the hotel room. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's even like, I have all things planned for today, and she's just like, well, the ring was enough, time to have sex.
Yeah. And honestly, if I were Jimmy, I'd kind of be disappointed with all that too. Like it would be it's like because he rejected the sex in the first place.
Yeah,
like, that was part of the storyline. So he was like, I want to like have this connection, and then they don't get to have the connection. She's just like, no sex now. Like it's just, it's just like, but yes. I guess I appreciate like that he has been in love with her for all this time, and then the moment that she says I love you too, he feels strange about it. And like that's not like a Dostoevsky level of pathos or anything,
no.
but like okay, for like a middle school level student film, it's fine. I mean, they could have gone a different direction where like if it was like where he just ends up being the typical asshole that he hated, where he's like, oh yeah, I slept with the woman and now she's getting clingy and I'm going to push her away. Like, as in like, he's just the jock that he always said he was better than. They could have done that, but instead they went to this like kind of like warped character for both of them, which, I guess we'll see in a few months or in a year or whenever we get to that, how that holds up.
So, yeah, I guess I just want to acknowledge too. I said it before, and you said it too, but I just want to acknowledge again. I do appreciate how ambitious this was. Like, it's a 4-part thing that they gave away for free on YouTube, and that they also put on these DVDs. That like they really did shoot things on location in Chicago. They really went to stores, went to beach. Like they're like I appreciate that. It's just the execution, but I appreciate that they tried. But that is the end of the show, and we've never had a review like this where we've basically had like the show is split into two. I guess we'll have to get used to that now with these upcoming pay-per-views. But I guess to say about the second half of the show, I will just, or not the second half, but the last hour, the DVD extra is, if I was giving like buying advice to someone at the time, I would say, definitely watch the pay-per-view. You do not need to buy the DVD. The DVD is just for completionists because I enjoyed the scram. I enjoyed everything, but maybe the bad vibes of the women's match to some degree or the other. But everything here on this DVD is very, very skippable. It's only an hour. Like, it's only an hour of extra stuff, even though it's on a whole separate DVD. It just is like, this would be I don't think I'll be able to do this for the next pay-per-view, but this one is an easy thing of buy the pay-per-view, don't buy the DVD.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, listen, that's not an option at all anymore, so
yeah.
Don't worry about it. But yes, I mean, the pay-per-view was really good, and everything else was less good, pretty clearly.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're watching it now where you can just watch everything through illegal or eBay means, you can watch everything. I mean, I would say that last hour again is, you got to be a real hardcore Arch fan to watch that.
I agree.
Your time is worth something. Matt, who wins the Matt F trophy?
So I think this is the first time I've ever given it to this person, but I'm giving it to Claudio Castagnoli. This is like kind of a coming out party for him as far as I'm concerned. Just spectacular performance in the best match of the night. And, where it's like, okay, yes, this is Claudio. And I hope we get to see a lot more of this version of Claudio.
Yeah, I agree. This was his, and like when you think of like the talent in the top main event and even the talent in his own match, the fact that he kind of came away as like, even with that report from Kerry Silver was saying like, man, like Claudio's like one of the guys that comes out looking the best on this night, when everyone on this show seemed to be having like their A game. Like, that's a really big feather in Claudio's cap to me that people won't remember. It's just like, yeah, he was kind of the guy on this show. So kudos to him. And that brings us to plugs. If you want to contact us, ThROH@gmail.com. That's THROH for through, of course, the same way you see it spelled on your phone right now. At Trevor Dame on Twitter, at MayorMGF on Twitter. If you search for those same usernames on Blue Sky, you'll find us. And next time on the show, we are back into B-Show Bliss, man. After all the extra work and stuff, I can just relax a bit. We can just enjoy a good, fun show. A fight at the Roxbury, maybe one of the funniest, dumbest names for a Ring of Honor show ever.
One of the best names. Are you kidding me? One of the best names. I'm not joking, man.
Main event, Jay Briscoe versus Takeshi Morishima. So that should be fun to see because they definitely had good chemistry in that tag match the night before. So it'll be fun to revisit that. And yeah, we will have all sorts of stuff, I am sure. Again, we have those other, if you miss us, if you can't get enough of us, we have those podcasts I plug up top. And so until then, until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.